Yeah.
Like, that's the real thing for me. Is the worst chip shop experience you've had, and the Blue Lagoon exists.
Yeah, no, it
One
was.
in Sauchiehall Street specifically in Glasgow exists, and yet somehow you had a worse one in St Andrews.
It's because it's a Tory one. It's not just a shite chippy. It's like a Tory shite chippy. Right, time to post here, there, and everywhere. So get that going. Okay, Discord done. Tumblr next. Hey Kai, hey Talesian, hey Shiniest Crow, hey Dgrim. I think it's only fair, Joy, that we actually start an AyeSphere tag on Tumblr.
We probably should.
Boom. It's there now. There for the world to see. Hey, lovely scientist. Cool, Twitter.
That's a threat.
I don't know why Twitter does this, but every single time I post the link to the Twitch channel, it almost seems to pull a hyperlink from at some point during the week. So it says I for Scotland, and the hyperlink says starting Stardew Valley, as opposed to what this is supposed to be. But yeah. Right. How we doing?
Good. I've stopped shoveling food into my face, so you can. I mean, you could have put
About
it live anyway if you wanted to. I'm sure that's somebody's kink. They could have enjoyed.
everyone gets a kink. Watching people eat.
Also, get to see my lovely sunglasses
Hello there.
today because I'm migrained slightly.
Yeah, they are looking really cool, to be honest. So you've got that going. And what's the t-shirt say today?
The T-shirt is the Goblin Queen. I don't know
Goblin
if you can see it yet.
Nice.
Goblin Queen.
Excellent.
It felt appropriate for Notting Hill.
Nice. Well, I've got Skeletor lounging seductively on my pec. That's
Excellent.
and it's hand stitched as well, which is quite nice.
Nice wee touch.
We've got a question right through the gate there, Joy. What country's better, Ireland or England?
Ireland, obviously.
Ireland, naturally, yeah. Better at rugby, better at being an independent country, better at not being super shite. Although I do think that, well, like everywhere, Ireland's got quite a big problem with landlordism.
Yes.
But then again, where doesn't? Joy's very silent this time. That's odd. Let me see if I can fix that. How about now?
Funny. It's funny because when we were doing the testing, I was super loud in your ear holes.
Yeah, no, you like ruptured my eardrum. Oh, so okay. You weren't really asking our opinion there then, Gregor. You were just wanting to tell us yours. Okay, sure. Whatever.
You're
Cool.
probably not going to have fun in a stream, pal. Just letting you know. Just a wee hint.
Yeah. So yeah, how was last week? I'd like to say, are you kind of recovered, but is that like a work in progress?
It's an ongoing process. I was recovered from doing the audiobooks, but then I have everything else to keep up with as well. Um, and yeah, green migraine light is on, unfortunately. But yeah, everything's been going fine. Like, I really thank you to everyone that supported the audiobook. It's been a fantastic week for that. I've been kind of watching that happen and just being like, oh wow, this is fantastic. And I've not really had the energy to do any promotion or anything. But yeah, it's been a good week. It's been a good week. And then today I woke up and I'm going, I have another migraine. So it's just one of those
But
things.
that just gives you like straight up an excuse to chill out though. You've done all the hard work to actually get the audiobook out. So now your body's like, okay, tick that job. It's done, and
Yes.
now I can collapse on myself
Yes.
and give
Pretty much.
give you all the problems.
Pretty
I'll,
much exactly what happened. My body went, no, we finished the task, and but we have all the other tasks to do. My body went, no, we don't, and just.
I always when I was working, God, that's a weird thing to say. But yeah, when I was working, when I like booked holidays, or like when it came up to like Christmas or whatever like that, where it was like you kind of mandated holidays, because I never really take holidays, and like my body would always just like fucking shut down. It's like my immune system would be like, right, tools down, lads, we're all good. we can get fucked by whatever now, because we're technically supposed to be on holiday, and then I would just spend all of my holiday time like trying to
Great when that
survive.
happens.
Yeah,
Absolutely fantastic. Hate it so much.
and then you get into like, oh, I've not actually relaxed much because I've been sneezing or whatever it was.
Mhm.
Tu-
For me, it's always been migraines. It's always been my body seems to wait, but then it's yeah.
yeah.
I have I have chronic migraine disease, which is, I mean, to anyone listening, if you've not been told this, migraine is technically classed as a disease.
Hmm.
So if anyone ever tells you it's just a headache, they can get stuffed.
Yeah. They can fuck off.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, I've seen Tundra's been listening to your audiobook, going to sleep every night, going to bed with
No.
Nathan and Vlad. I mean, that's also a lot of
One of
people's kinks, I imagine.
Probably, yeah. Wish fulfillment happening there. One of my friends told me they've been listening to it while they've been driving,
Oh.
and they had a blood pressure appointment with their doctor, their cardiologist after it, and they got to specifically the sexy chapter between the two lads, um, and they ended up on blood pressure medication because their blood pressure was so high. I was like, on the one hand, thank you for the compliment. On the other hand, please don't die.
Hey, Dracotta, how you doing? I love that. That's like amazing. Yeah, you had this weird spike while you were driving. What was happening there?
Yeah.
Nothing, nothing.
What were you doing? Nothing. Nothing. No. I've
So
also,
sorry, go on, Joy.
I was going to say, I've also got my smoker's cough this week, despite the fact that I've never smoked a day in my life. I also do not have COVID. It's just the birch pollen is in the air over here right now.
Ah,
Um. So just in case anyone's watching me cough and worrying, it's not that. It's just trees having sex that's getting me.
fair enough. I was able to nurse my voice back to somewhat okay standard. I don't know why, but sorry, it's still this week. On Thursday we were playing some like Stardew Valley, and I was specifically talking about looking after your voice, because me and Jessica had watched a video about Les Miserables and the movie, and how like all of the actors in the movie put themselves at like massive risk because they were like performing all the songs in the film live,
Mm-hmm.
and they were singing for like 12 hours a day, like doing just
Mm-hmm.
take after take after take, like, and pretty much trashing their voices. And Hugh Jackman in particular, who's a good singer on stage as far as I'm aware, but because he wanted to look a certain way in the film, he dehydrated himself for 36 hours, so he wasn't drinking water in between like any takes. And basically the moment that I said, oh, you've got to look after your voice, and I've done a lot more speaking since I've like I would attend like sales calls and stuff like that all my time in my job, but
Mm-hmm.
like I've been speaking a lot more just because I've been streaming kind of like full time. And basically the moment I said that, I could feel my throat go, oh, you gave us a signal. Fuck you, you're gonna have no voice tomorrow. So Friday was a bit of a kind of ISMR session,
Mm-hmm.
and then like honey and tea and honey and hot water and all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fine by the end of Friday. Just like in the morning, I was total gubbed. Um,
it's one of the things
Fuck's
when I was
sake.
still sort of looking into becoming a teacher. God
Mm.
knows how that would have panned out. They were always talking about protecting your voice because so many teachers lose their voice,
Mm.
or they end up with like permanent laryngitis, basically.
Oh
And
wow.
I always remember that my high school teachers, they all had throat problems, and it was because they were always trying to. None of them, apart from the drama teachers, none of them had been taught how to project whilst also protecting their vocal cords.
Mm.
Um, which is actually really funny because I developed vocal cord dysfunction in my 20s, which is literally my vocal cords will slam shut sometimes if I'm talking for too long.
Mm.
Um, but I go to speech therapy. I actually do proper speech therapy to manage that, and it's been great for being able to actually project my voice because for the longest time I had a very very soft, quiet voice, and it wasn't because I was trying to be that way. It was because I couldn't project past that because my vocal cords were like scrunched up
Mm.
from using my voice constantly in all my jobs I was doing. So that was a really interesting thing to finally get help with that, and my voice has been so much better ever since then. I would,
Mm.
yeah, speech therapy is wonderful for
Yeah,
just
I'm not gonna
fixing
lie. I
your
would.
voice and
I would love to do something like that, but then again, I caught myself looking at. I want to go to singing lessons. I think that'd be great. Like I
yeah,
almost.
a lot of the singing lessons teach the same thing. Yeah,
Uh,
because you have to try and protect yourself basically, and also still get use out of your voice.
yeah, because like
Um,
I think I'd like. I'm not gonna tell you when I start them. Actually, I'm just gonna come on the podcast one day and just belt out a song, and everyone's gonna be like, "Where the fuck did that come from?" And how is he able to breathe all the way through that? And knowing me, it'll
I'm looking
probably be
forward
Linkin
to it. I'm
Park.
telling you, I'm gonna wait for that with anticipation.
So, I suppose we've got to address the elephant in the room, and that is, did you enjoy celebrating the Jubilee in the America where you are? Where's your Union Jack bunting?
I genuinely forgot it was happening until I logged into Twitter and I saw one of my friends was like, "Oh yeah, Jubilee stuff," and I was just like, "Why are we still friends? Like who?
Ugh.
Why are you doing this? Oh, it's part of your job. Okay, yeah, uh-huh."
Yeah,
No, I had no idea it
sure.
was happening. That I genuinely I knew it was happening on some level, but I'd forgotten. Um, because it's
That's a
obviously
good
not a thing
thing.
here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you'd kind of hope. Like there has been a couple of Americans on Tumblr being like, "Oh, I've got an auntie who's like really into like Kate Middleton, so it's like celebrating." And like, well, why?
There's
That's
always weirdos though.
yeah. There's always one. Like there's thankfully, I mean, unfortunately there's a wee bit of bunting outside my house. There's like some like no, it's not like council done. It's like business owners that are trying to like they're not really celebrating the Jubilee, but it's like oh, come and eat in my restaurant for the Jubilee. Like
Yeah.
it's like a marketing thing, which I kind of get, but it's still very like. Ugh. But um,
My my parents are um shall we say they're not in a conservative area, but they're in a nice area, and they were quite surprised because nobody had put up any bunting outside. And then my
hmm.
dad apparently woke up and the neighbour across the street had put Union Jack bunting like everywhere,
Oh
and there
God.
was a giant 5 foot portrait of the Queen in his front garden.
Yeah,
Um,
Jessica was out for a driving lesson on Thursday and came across a house that had a cardboard cutout of the Queen, and it's like,
yeah,
what sort of person walks into, well, what sort of shop sells one of those, but also what sort of person walks in and buys that? Like, that's a that's a granny shagger thing to do, you know? It's very very odd. Um,
yeah. It was my dad was kind of staring at it, and my mum was like, "Do not." Do not, whatever you're thinking. And Dad's like, oh, eggs wash off. My wee old 72-year-old dad just getting ready to
you
get arrested for public whatever
yeah, vandalism,
vandalism.
vandalism of
Vandalism.
private property or something like that.
Yeah,
That'd be funny though. I'd love
it
to
would.
see. I'd love to see someone do like a kind of, like one of those like 5 second vines where like people like could sprint and like just you see them running and they just drop kick something and then it cuts and that's the end of the video. We can have like a 5 second TikTok of someone drop kicking a queen cut out. That would be quite fun. But yeah, it's been really it's like Scotland in general's been pretty quiet on Jubilee celebrations. There has been there was a thing in Stonehaven, I think, and it was like two Conservative councillors were lighting a beacon. It was like a I'm not sure if it was a council run event or it was like a monarchist thing, but there was like just the two councillors there to light the beacon.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. There was like nobody else. I think there was a guy there with Doug,
Cringe.
and it's like just like weird sycophancy up and down the UK. Like it's definitely brought out the weirdos. There's a pub in Glasgow that's like changed changed their name to like the Queen Elizabeth Arms or something, and it was like absolutely covered in Union Jacks, and inside there was like full on paneling of the Queen, like the multiple portraits, like not like hanging portraits, like painted onto the fucking wall, like photos of the Queen, and it's just like weird. Like, why would you do that? There's a lot of weirdos, and then there was that
Yeah.
one woman on BBC that was like, "Oh, I would love to be taxed double to pay for her." It's like, God, do you want more boot to lick? Like, just...
Do you want a side of boot with, a side of boot to go with your boot, basically? I just, yeah, I'd be taxed double. If my parents got taxed double, they would not be able to live.
yeah,
Just the way things are at the moment in the UK. I mean, even, like, it's just, the monarchy is such an insidious holdover from imperialism.
yeah.
It has no place in modern society.
Nah, not at all.
Absolutely zero.
It is minging how it actually works. Like the whole thing, it's like even seeing like obviously there's loads of things that's wrong with it, but even looking at like some of the individual bits of the monarchy in isolation's weird. Like see how they wear the sort of red uniforms, and it's like the kind of classic it's the sort of ceremonial uniforms that like
Mm-hmm.
men in the monarchy wear. You always see them with like tons of medals. Now, like putting aside all of the military jingoistic stuff, what have they done to earn any of those fucking medals, like at all? Like, there's people that like there's actual soldiers that go out and do stuff, and have been in like direct line of fire and all the rest, and they've not got fucking any medals, that sort of thing. So even if you park the issues obviously with the military going into other countries and you park the monarchy as a thing, like viewing some stuff in isolation here, there's not really that much for monarchists to get behind. I think everyone just really likes the Queen. Like I genuinely think it's like the Queen's such a focal point that I reckon the whole thing will really
I
struggle
think it'll
when she
collapse when they
goes.
finally admit that she's dead. I'm just
The holograms have been amazing over the past couple of days.
I know. It's such a meme that even my mum said she thinks that the Queen's actually dead, and I'm going. My mum's quite a mild person. Like she wouldn't say if you ever said that you'd wish death on somebody, she crosses herself and gets really upset because you'd ever say something that hideous. But when it comes to the Queen, she's been dead for months. She's convinced. She's going, that's an actor. That's not her. Just
Yeah.
fully convinced it's either a hologram or some wee old granny that they've stuffed into one of those hats.
We've got a couple of comments there about the projected images of the Queen onto Stonehenge. Like, so that was a thing. So you've got like an ancient monument that nobody knows really where it came from, and the mystery surrounding it still like really, interests people to this day. And you're projecting that onto Stonehenge. It's really quite bizarre.
And it's just it's so unnecessary.
Yeah.
And also, what does the Queen have to do with Stonehenge? Absolutely sweet
Fuck all. Yeah.
It's really just it's thank you, Sky. They're my migraine protection at the minute. The I forget what else it was, but it was the Stonehenge when they do the solstice and they televise that. That is always wonderful to watch that, and it's really nice to see how many people turn up to see the sunrise and everything else. It's always a really nice. I don't know if spiritual is the right word. I'm sure for some people it is spiritual. For me, it's just a very humanizing moment. projecting the Queen onto that destroys that for me, because that
Yeah.
is not about humanity being together. That is not about the sun coming back after winter. That is literally just projecting your jingo imperialism onto a time that, for many people, holds spiritual significance.
Yeah.
Um,
And
it's just
also, it's
gross.
just like away from everything else. Like, you know, I think there is that kind of nice spiritual bit about Stonehenge, and like kind
Mm-hmm.
of back to what I was saying about like the mystery surrounding Stonehenge, and like one of the things that's really like quite amazing is how there is that kind of mystery around so many ancient monuments that like I just trying to like insert your kind of imperialist shite onto them is really
Mm-hmm.
minging. And I think it was the Stonehenge like actual account that set up the projectors. It wasn't like some random guy drove by in his car and was like, "I'm gonna do this as a bit." Unfortunately, it
Well,
was
the
the
Stonehenge is protected by English Heritage Society, so that would make sense that they would do that, because they tend
yeah
to, they manage a lot of the estates and everything else. But it's, and the argument that they bring in tourism is garbage as well, because it's not them, it's the houses.
yeah. It's like
We
for
don't need the
fucking
we don't. Yeah, we don't need the
Versailles.
royalty to exist for
Yeah,
the houses to exist. They're funded by public money anyway.
yeah. I mean, like
So.
Versailles by itself brings in more
Mhm.
tourism
Mhm.
money than fucking anything that comes over to the UK. So, like, let people walk around Buckingham Palace. Fuck it.
Mhm.
And fucking all of them, to be honest. Like, I mean, you know, you could do tourism with the Holyrood Palace as well, and I'm sure there's a couple other ones.
You
Um,
could. I mean, we did a tour of the Holyrood one um back when ETD almost got arrested in Parliament. That's a whole other story. Um, and it looked run down and very crummy.
aye,
It was
it's
very kind of, it's not been cleaned thoroughly since the 80s. It was very,
aye,
very scummy feeling.
it's
And I'm
it's
going, if
like
this was publicly
weathered,
maintained,
isn't
it
it?
would be nicer. Yeah.
Aye, it's like it's that kind of old stone that's not been cleaned in ages, so it's
Yeah.
like really
Mm-hmm.
weather battered. It's not the nicest. I mean, in fairness, kind of glad that they're not wasting money like maintaining it. It's like fuck it, if the royals want to maintain it, they can
Mm-hmm.
fucking get the toothbrushes out and scrub the rocks
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Um, but
But yeah,
yeah,
that was the thing in when I was watching The Crown, because Mum was watching The Crown on Netflix,
mm,
and during the 80s, during the Thatcher years, when the guy, based on the true story, when the guy broke into Buckingham Palace and he managed to make it into the Queen's bedrooms, I forget his name, but apparently one of the things he said to her was, "Place could do with a bit of a paint." So the paint's flaking off everywhere. Do you not take care of the place? And it's like, they don't. That it's
yeah.
so much about keeping the institution alive that they don't actually do anything to maintain it beyond
That's
trying to.
a fantastic quote. Just you break into the Queen's house and tell her that she's a fucking mess.
Pretty much, that was apparently what he said. He says, I used to be a painter. I'll come in and fix it. But apparently he was looking around going, this place is grubby. Like,
You should let the kitchens use garlic as well.
I know.
That is
That's so
odd.
funny to me that that's not allowed. And I'm going, that you're just fueling the fact that you're a vampire. And this is coming from me sitting here in my green light with my vampire wing glasses. Like, it's just, yeah.
Yeah.
The more stuff I see about the monarchy that comes out, the more I'm just like, yous are not real. Yous are absolutely, there's no point to yous.
It's bizarre institution, and one that's on its last legs. Really, like someone did make like I posted about it a wee while ago, and someone was like someone was disgusted at the thought because I said that William and Kate are generally well liked. And
Mm-hmm.
like someone did take up on themselves to be like, well, William and Kate, here are all of the things that's problematic with William and Kate is if I wasn't quite aware of all of the things they do,
Mm-hmm.
like that visit to Jamaica or when they've visited Africa in the past and there's all these awful images. But like it was more like I'd say that William and Kate are more liked by the monarchists as opposed to like Charles and Camilla. So it's like
Yes.
with a bit of a PR push, I imagine you're gonna have that line of secession kind of ironed out to an extent. As in they'd maybe get away with it, but it would die.
Mm-hmm.
I mean Harry and Meghan, they're like not a fan of that anyway. But like I think it's going to be really difficult when the Queen does go, because like there's going to be all these old people who don't really care about Charles, and by that point William's like much younger than them. So your percentage of people who really care about the monarchy. I mean, I remember high school, and I remember like not being a massive fan of the monarchy in high school, and this was around when
Mm-hmm.
like the independence referendum was going, and like it came up in conversation. Oh, would we keep the Queen? And it's kind of like, well, doesn't really matter in the immediate term, but ideally, I would like Scotland to become a republic. Um, but then that would put off particularly a couple of lassies in the year who were like, "Oh, the Queen's so cute though. She's like your wee granny and stuff like that." And it's like you're not gonna get anyone saying Prince Charles is like your wee granddad. Uh,
No,
like you're not gonna get that. And then William and Kate are just another celebrity family. They're not really
they're on par with the Kardashians at this point, which is another disease on
with
society. But that's
less drama. But
yes,
yeah,
yes.
I hate
But
the
it's
Kardashians. I hate that
sort
whole.
of.
I hate that institution. And then for I hate that I can call them an institution as well. That is a blight. Um, but yeah,
Charles
like
already looks like he's about to collapse at any given minute. He does not look like a well man. I
yeah,
will say that he does not look like a well man.
I mean,
Um,
like looking at his fingers. If you look at like Charles's fingers,
he's got a lot of swelling happening, which is unfortunate that anyone's health is bad, but at the same time, it's not
but
really a good
the
indicator of health.
But the cause of that though is just like years and years of like the most rich food going.
Yeah.
Like it'll be all the like absolutely like every single meal like flawlessly cooked, like all the sort of foie gras, all the really expensive wines. That's all of that
hmm
like
It's very
coming
almost
to
gouty.
fruition.
It's very almost like it almost looks a wee bit like gout spelling to me.
Yeah.
Which is
Well,
funny
that
too
is
because
it.
my dad actually got diagnosed with gout last
Mm.
week, and he was kind of going, says, "Oh, that was a rich man's thing," and the doctor was kind of like, "Well, it used to be because only rich men could afford certain things." He says, "Basically anyone can get it, but it's just generally lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's your body, but it can also be like just health in general." But
Mm.
um, my dad's got it in his big toe, and he says it's agonizing. And but when we were talking about that as well, because we were actually talking about the monarchy, and he was going, he must be just like he was wearing all those state rings and everything else in that big uniform. And my dad made the comment that he looks like the Pillsbury Doughboy shoved into a red uniform because he just looks
Yeah.
so puffy and swollen.
Aye.
And it's I mean, I don't wish ill health on anybody, but it just feels really telling of the type of lifestyle that they lead.
Oh
That
yeah.
it's yeah.
I mean,
I
to be honest,
I don't think Charles will last long.
yeah, I mean every single time I actually see them though, as in you see like you obviously see promotional stills from a lot of their shit that gets splashed all over the newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
See when they're actually on camera live and there's like no doctoring on the image or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like William looked fucking terrible when he was giving out, like when he was doing a speech over the course of the last couple of days. He looked he looked terrible. Um, it's got to be a lifestyle thing. It's weird. It's like obviously they are limited in what they can do. They can't eat shellfish. They can't eat fucking garlic. But
Anything that's rich in antioxidants,
yeah,
actually, when you think about it, food that's
Gar-
actually really good for you.
yeah. I mean, garlic's my last line of defense of dying at the age of 50. I think. But it's fascinating. As in fascinating to kind of see like how you can have all that money and all that wealth and all that extravagance and like just kind of not look after yourself or not like you know it's odd because
Yeah, and as hello as science, lovely scientists point out, some people are legitimately
yeah.
allergic to like that sort of. I'm one of those people. I'm allergic to garlic and a bunch of other things as well. That it's a choice for them because they don't want anyone to have bad breath.
I mean,
That's the reason the monarchy's not
I
allowed
was,
garlic, is
I
that they
was gonna
don't
say
want anyone to
you're.
have bad breath.
I was gonna say you're the British royal family. You might as well own the stereotype, right? It's like bad
Hmm.
teeth, bad breath. Just fucking roll with it.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
But
and just brush your teeth. What the fuck? Like,
yeah.
what-
I mean, not everyone has. I was gonna say not everyone has the money for orthodontics and braces, but they're the royal fucking
they do.
family.
Yeah. It's,
Like,
like, I mean, I'm one of the, I kind of like obsessively brush my teeth. I'd say that's probably like one of the main things. It's like the first thing I do when I get up. Like, I need to brush my teeth. I would like if if I have food and if it's like there, I might as well brush my teeth then. Like, obviously you can brush too much and then it starts to harm like the enamel on your
mhm.
mouth. But like, I don't know. It's just like it's a thing for me that like every single morning the first thing I do, is go and do my teeth. Like that's it. It's like a ritual.
Yeah.
Um, I just have to do it. So it's, I mean, if you were really that concerned with garlic breath, you could just go and do your teeth. Although I suppose if you're in Buckingham Palace, that means maybe walking like a kilometre to, to your bathroom with your toothbrush in it.
Probably.
Oh fuck! I'm too lazy to brush my teeth. You're grateful to have a body that appreciates garlic. Good stuff, lovely scientist. So,
I never used to be allergic, and then when I developed the allergy, I was going, "This is just one more nail in the coffin that I am actually becoming a vampire." Because that was when the joke started on Tumblr that I was a vampire, and then like a week later, I was like
your
told I had the alum allergy, and I was just like, "Are you kidding me?"
your body listened and was like, right, this is it. This is my time. So we've kind of got like two. I'd say we've got two main things for this stream, really. But we thought it would be good to introduce a kind of section where we ask each other one question, and this means that anyone who doesn't know the deep lore behind myself or Joy could learn a wee bit more. And then, of course, we've got Notting Hill, which Joy has warned me might need censored before going up on YouTube. Um,
Yeah.
which is going to be an interesting one. Yeah, there's tons of lore, Dakota. There's tons of lore. So I suppose we could start with that then. Joy, the questions. Does that
Yeah, we could.
that work? Yeah. So I'm gonna go first. I'm gonna ask you your question first.
Sure.
And this is actually more of a thing that I don't know. I know nothing about you pre like crucifix nail nipples, to be honest. You're a ghost in the machine as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, what a legacy. Yeah. Okay.
So I suppose this is more about young Joy. So young Joy, what's going on there, and what was your kind of like path to that kind of like editing job? How did you get from there? And of course you studied creative writing and all the rest of it, but we're talking about before that. What
Even
was?
before that, we're going.
Oh, we're going back. We're time
We're
machining
going back to the
this.
start. So if we want to go back to the very, very beginning, I do actually have a post on Tumblr about how I got into writing. And with hindsight, it was probably a sign of being on the neurodivergent spectrum as well, but my parents didn't realise, obviously. But when I was learning to read, my parents put words everywhere. Like literally, they would put giant labels all over the house. So the TV would say television, the bookshelf would say shelf, the cat had a wee thing that said cat. Window was they literally everything in their house had a word stuck to it, and that was how they taught me to read, because I would look everywhere and I would literally see words everywhere, and then even when they took the words down, I still see words everywhere, and like literally if I let myself unfocus and see things, I will look around this room and I will see, the word lamp looking in front of me. I will see screen. I will see, ruler. Like just what I see the word, and I'm always constantly rearranging the words to make sentences. What I've always been doing since I was very, very young, and when I remember telling people that, and they used to go, "You're fucking weird," like absolutely deranged. And it wasn't until really recently when I was talking to my ADHD therapist that she was kind of going, it's probably just the way that your ADHD manifests. Your parents gave you that kind of stimuli, and it has stuck with you ever since. Um, there might be another word for it as well, but I can't remember. But that was basically how it started. Was I was seeing words everywhere, and when you see words everywhere, it's very easy to make sentences constantly. So I was always looking to arrange my surroundings into pleasing sentences in my brain just to keep myself entertained. Um, and it just kind of kept going from there. It was just absolutely ravenous about books. It was the one thing that um, if I wanted, if I asked for a toy, I was only allowed like something like toys at like Christmas, whatever. But if I asked for books, I could have as many books as I wanted. So my childhood library is fairly extensive, which it still exists. My dad has kept most of it intact, and it looks fairly impressive. I must say, compared to what I have now. But you can't really bring 10,000 books with you over the ocean unless you rent a pod. But it's the yeah, like Sky's saying, it's similar, but you see things through a camera framing, and it's just always been part of me is that words make my brain feel happy, and I've always followed letters and words, and I was always in trouble because they tell you to write, oh, you've to write an assignment that's 2 pages long. Mine would be 10, without even meaning to.
Yeah.
And the it was one of my secondary school teachers who I think he twigged that I was probably neurodivergent, even though we didn't really have the wording for that back then, because I am fairly old compared to some of you. And he actually kind of let my academic study go in favour of creative writing. He used to let me just sit and do creative stories when other people were doing like close reading assignments. I still had to do them, but he was also giving me extra stuff to do with creative writing as well. And that kind of fueled into that. And then when I went to university, I didn't do creative writing at first. I actually did linguistics. I did linguistics and literary theory, and then I did start to, oh, look at the wee Highland coo. Oh.
Got that yesterday.
But I bounced around a lot, and I did as many courses as I could because I wanted. If I didn't have to do exams, I would be constantly learning. And I did a lot of things. I did literary theory. I did linguistics. I did I famously did my dissertation, and people still ask me for it on Tumblr, and unfortunately, it is lost. I did my dissertation on the history of the evolution of folktale into science fiction and fantasy as it is today, focusing a lot on Terry Pratchett, and that was really funny because at the time Strathclyde University, which is where I went, did not have a teacher able to mark it. It had to be sent to Manchester, where the science fiction faculty was currently, at the time, it was the best faculty for science fiction. So that was fun too. And I remember it was one of my teachers, one of my professors was going, oh, what do you plan to do when you graduate? And I'm going, well, I'm probably going to go into teaching, because that's kind of what you do when you get an English degree. You go into teaching. And he looked at me and he went, oh, darling, that's a waste. He says, you need to be writing something. And I did a couple of months of teaching, and I did the shadowing. I didn't do it I got so far with it, and it was after watching the teacher cry after the students left the room, I thought, I can't do this. And I bailed, and I didn't do anything to do with words for a very long time. I worked a lot of customer service jobs. I did a lot of food service jobs. I got my food science qualifications, all those sorts of things. And I just happened, as soon as I graduated with the linguistics one that I had, my friend contacted me and said, I am looking for an assistant editor to basically just do the kind of the go for jobs. Do you want to apply for it? And I said, yeah, sure. And I did it's a basic competency, like a basic grammar and style check and everything else. And I passed, obviously. And then I spent about a year going through slush piles, which is the technical term for when people send in manuscripts that are not represented by an agent. and you're basically mining for gold in a bunch of slush to see if there's any decent manuscripts in there.
Mm.
Um, but yeah. Yeah, not a lot of people go through the cadet teaching assistant thing, continue because they realise how awful it is. Yeah, it's really hard. Teaching is a really hard profession and it deserves respect. There are some
Mm.
teachers who shouldn't be teachers, but I think a lot of teachers are very undervalued and a lot of them just get worn down by a system because they're not getting the funding they need. And that was fundamentally what was wrong with the place I was shadowing at. This poor she was only a couple of years older than me, and she was, our all of our classes were at maximum capacity, and they were just you couldn't discipline them for love nor money.
Mm.
And I remember looking at that, going, I will have a mental breakdown. I can't do this. So I just kind of jumped ship and kind of the phrase I use is I followed the dopamine. I just did whatever made me feel happy and let me do whatever I wanted, and that's how I kind of ended up here.
That's
So
fair. That's a good mantra to live by. Follow the dopamine.
follow the dopamine. It's yeah. I mean, other people say, "Oh, it's following your passion." I'm not because I don't really have passions. I have interests that will switch randomly, and I will follow them to see where they take me. It just so
Oh,
happens that I've managed to turn the writing thing into a viable career, which nobody is more shocked than me that has turned it to be
well,
the
you've
main.
done it extremely well. I think
Thank
it's
you.
it's interesting about the teacher thing because like I think every single person, how you know that like teaching's a like profession that should be respected is like everyone has a teacher that was a great teacher.
Hmm.
And how much of a kind of lasting impression having a great teacher does. But I think there was also a bunch of shite. There
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
like just we were talking about this yesterday with my mum and dad because we were out in St Andrews for my dad's birthday, and we ended up talking about like high school and stuff like that, and they said that they went round all of my teachers one parents night, and they'd had like pretty good reviews across the board. I was obviously a wonderful student, um, but they got to my history teacher who basically said the complete opposite of like what all of the other teachers had said. Um, to the point where they were like, "Are you sure you're talking about like our son?" But it's because he didn't like me, and he specifically didn't like me because I was pro independence. He was like an old Labour guy who was just not like he was very like the sort of Labour guy that saw himself as being all workers uniony, but he was actually just like a Tony Blair monarchy shagger.
Yeah.
Um,
Centralist.
yeah, like well, centralism are kind of centre right to be honest. Like,
Hmm.
but that was just like that one teacher, and like I wore him down eventually, and I did higher history, and he kind of liked me, but there was still that he did not like the fact at all that I was pro independence, and I became really insufferable in high school, because of course I was still in high school when the end of the campaign kicked off, so it was like. Yeah, my teachers
See,
knew
I feel
me.
ancient because it was devolution when I was that
Yeah,
age.
yeah.
um,
But
but yeah, I had
the latter
yeah,
devolution, not the early, not the 79. So you're good.
yeah, the latter ones, yeah. Not that old, not
No,
yet.
no, no,
But
not at all.
it was for me it was math teachers. I
Mm.
never got any secondary school qualifications in mathematics. And I had tutors. I had a million tutors. And everyone eventually just went, she's fine. She'll fine. One of the things that a teacher actually told me was, just marry a man who's good at numbers, hen, and you'll do fine. And I was like, very sexist, but okay.
Yeah, not great.
Um, and that was kind of her solution to it because she was kind of going, I had so many English teachers. There was three English teachers who were vying for me to go into doing creative writing, and they were really just pushing for that. And it was the yeah, I'm just reading Tandra's comment. I was always the pleasure to have in class, but never did my homework. Also same. And it was just kind of assumed that I was wordy and that numbers were not my thing. We now know that I have two learning disabilities. One of them is specific to numbers, the other one's ADHD. And the way it was handled was kind of like, oh well, she's gifted at this, so we'll let this slide. And it was fine, but it meant when I was applying
Mm.
for a lot of jobs, it was going, well, how come you don't have any basic maths? Like how do you not have any of this? I'm going, well, I was told I was too stupid to do it, so
Yeah.
I just kind of gave up. Like that was I failed so many exams for it. I was like, well, I can't do it. But the thing is, I can do it as long as there's not an exam.
Yeah. See, I got a wee bit of that when I was in high school as well, because it's like the moment the maths teachers learned that you were okay with, like, you were good at English. Like, I mean, I like excelled at English when I was in high school, both kind of standard grade and higher, and I did advanced higher as
Mm-hmm.
well.
So did
Um,
I. Yeah.
and like I almost felt like the moment the maths teachers knew that about me, that they kind of changed their tune a little bit. Because like it was both maths, but it was also the sciences. Because I didn't end up doing any science to higher. I did maths at higher, which was riot. But like I did chemistry and physics in standard grade,
Mm-hmm.
and um I did not too bad in them. But in fact, chemistry was the one I got a one, which is like the best grade for standard grade. I got one in chemistry, but it was like after my after my prelim, I was sitting at like pretty much I'm going to fail chemistry. So my teacher, instead of putting some extra effort into me, just decided it was a lost fucking cause. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I basically worked with my mum and my dad to do like past papers and absolutely sweated chemistry for like all that, and I ended up with like a top grade to the point where my teacher came down to my form class after we got the results because she knew what our class had got, and she was like basically begging me to do chemistry and higher, and I was like, well, after the past like 6 months, have you not given me anything? I think the fuck not. Which I
Yeah.
again, unfortunately, also kind of trained my brain to like not really appreciate exams, because like I was struggling in class. I did not understand a lot in class, but I was able to pull it out the hat for an exam just by memorizing stuff really well. So
Mm-hmm.
that didn't exactly endear me towards exams as a practice.
I
Like,
don't think they're the best way of. They're
uh,
more about memorizing things than actually learning,
yeah,
which is why I think so many people struggle with them. And it's especially here in America too. Like the standardized testing is not about education; it's about memorizing things and also conforming to tasks so that you become a good little worker.
yeah,
And it's the same in the UK. Like the way the exams were structured when I think there have been some changes, but the way it was for us was it was memorize facts and do as you're told. That was how you passed. Um,
yeah. I
and
mean,
yet, as Sky points out, that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell meme. Everyone knows that because it was drilled into you, but I don't actually understand. I understand it now because I got annoyed and I went and figured it out. But I
yeah,
didn't actually understand what any of that meant when I was in secondary school. I was just learning things so that I could parrot them on tests. The only thing I actually competently understood was English, and that
yeah,
wasn't even necessarily because of the school. It was because of my dad. It wasn't even because he was teaching me. It was just because he was giving me access to books that my peers did not have. Because there was a whole thing about how, oh, you should only read within your age range. My dad did not agree with that. He kind of let me have run wild at the library. If there was anything that he thought would be a little bit too raunchy for younger me, he would kind of pull that aside and say, "Wait till you're older." But I was never restricted from reading far beyond my age, and I think that really impacted how I was able to handle English as the subject.
yeah.
Um,
I feel
and
like that
yeah,
that I generally feel like, see, when you get to that point where you were like, I mean, I was similar in the way that I started to just devour books when I was going through primary and secondary school. Like I would just tear through books, and it was like, you'd. I think when it almost like that gives you a massive leap into how you're actually able to communicate with teachers, and a lot of the times it gives you
mm-hmm,
the vocabulary to communicate with teachers in a way that you can sound like a competent child,
mm-hmm,
and you can do that sort of stuff. And I think like I think that's where I got a wee bit annoyed when it ended up jumping to uni, and I'm not a massive fan of academia as a whole. Like, I'm not sure if it's just my experience with academia, but sometimes I feel like it comes up to this like brick wall where um, you've got like high end professors that get to follow their passion. For example, when I was studying at Edinburgh Uni, there was one of my Chinese lecturers who was really, really in to Chinese silent film. Like that was his thing. He loved Chinese silent film, which if you're coming up through the kind of academic ranks, you're like, okay, he's obviously been able to go to town on his passion. He's able to, he's really, really interested in it. He can have lectures on it. He can run a course based around it. But like the applicability of that to a lot of the other stuff we were doing was like minimal. You know, like this is a guy who's like well into his 50s, 60s and has had his whole life of being able to, you know, go in and like just learn about it. But it's really hard when you're doing that kind of undergraduate degree and you're trying to learn the language and you're expected to be so specific. Like that's like I almost feel like you would do your undergraduate like base level Chinese language and culture. You would then get a postgrad that would allow you to be, you know, Chinese film might be a thing that's very, very specific. And then you'd get a, you know, a PhD or whatever it is that allows you to target in. It just seemed so fucking broad. And I don't know, kind of uninteresting. And I also think like I'm not against the idea of academia for academia's sake. I'm not one of those folk who thinks that like absolutely everything should transfer into a job, but I think there is this kind of like academiaization of certain things that there's a lot of courses at university now that would actually be better off being hands-on practical college courses. Like for example, there were folk that were doing I think it was like specifically PE teaching like at uni, and they didn't get a chance to teach until they were in their final year. And it's like, you know, yeah, I'm just the pipeline to actually get teachers through the system. I mean, that could easily be a hands-on college course. It doesn't need to be a uni degree, but it seems like obviously now there's just this such a high have you got a degree from university thing that's a bit wanky.
It's trying to restrict certain jobs to people that can afford the university degree. And it's not, it's very different in Scotland obviously because we get our undergrad paid for.
Yeah.
But even then they want people of a certain class to only go into certain positions because they want you to be able to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of snobbery that I was encountering when I was in my third year at university for linguistics. I had a very, very snobby professor, and I told him I was struggling with his class because one of his assistants who was teaching the class wasn't competent at it. He was very obviously there on daddy's money.
Yep.
And he didn't really care about what he was doing. He was just there to get the credit so he could graduate and do whatever. Yeah. And I had a formal complaint about the guy, and I'm going, he's not actually teaching us anything. He's just kind of, you know, he's throwing text at us, and then whatever he's giving to us isn't actually in any of the exams or essays. And it was made into a kind of, this professor obviously was looking at me, and he was like, he says, the worst thing we did was open the colleges up to people who don't have the class to be here.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
That was what he said to me. And I remember sitting there and going, that's a dig at me because, you know, it was very, very obviously I was not upper class. It was a very, very obvious dig. And I walked straight out of there, and I actually went to my Scottish literature professor, Anne Scrivens, just if you're out there, still love you to pieces, you're wonderful. I went to her and I just bawled. Absolutely, just like in tears, going, basically, because it was just a whole kind of like, it was, you're not good enough. And it was and she listened to me. Once I was able to actually get words out, she was listening to me, and you could see the rage, you know, just forming in her face, and she's going, right, who's your other teacher? And I'm like, who else do you like? And I'm going, well, this is, you know, my revolutionary studies teacher was also fantastic. She's, we're going to go have a wee word with him. So we went to go walk in, and she walked into his office, and she went, right, Robert, I need you to know this, that Kenny's being a right cunt. So when actually they formed a plan together, and they actually took me to talk to the head of the department, and he was shocked. He was absolutely just kind of going, I can't believe he felt safe enough to say that. And I was going, well, you should look closer at your department then, because a lot of the people that are currently in assistant teaching positions under this guy are very classist, they're very sexist, and they fully believe that if you're not paying for your degree yourself, you don't deserve to be there.
Yourself is doing a lot of fucking words in that sense, because they're on there from their fucking mum and dad's money.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And
Jesus.
it caused a bit of a problem. It caused some noses to go out of joint, and it was a whole thing. But I got moved out of that class, fortunately. Me and my friend, actually, because she followed. She was like, fuck that, I'm not sticking around here. But it kind of basically put a mark on me for the rest of my education. That was, if you didn't like me, I immediately knew, because I obviously got blacklisted for kicking up a fuss over this thing. And it meant I ended up studying things I didn't necessarily want to study just to avoid them.
Yeah.
So I never actually got to finish my classics studies, because I could. Surprising no one, it was a classics. It was all the kind of the Wordsworth and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he was very, very much kind of like, well, if you're not. He was of the opinion, if you didn't come from a certain class, you didn't have the brain capacity to appreciate things. That's why you're struggling. It's nothing to do with the fact that we're not teaching properly.
Jesus.
And it was very, as soon as I got out of those classes, my grades shot up. And it showed you the benefit of having teachers who deserve to be there and teachers who are not well suited for the position.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the one thing that frustrated me the most about when I was doing Russian. The Russian department was not a good department. It had some lovely people in it, in fairness, but the general attitude for it was that they absolutely loved teaching Russian natives Russian, because language. So like what basically happened, first year we were divided into two lots. There was the people who were experienced with Russian, and there was the people who were coming in completely cold, right? And I was part of the completely cold group. And what happened was that by the time first year was over, apparently these two groups were supposed to be at equal level. Bearing in mind that the first group probably was either native fluency or had 6 years of Russian under them. So their ability to actually accelerate their learning through first year uni was massive. So we were put into the same class in second year. And from that point on, every single speaking class was just in Russian, right? Every oral class was just in Russian. And, they started to do that transition to being taught Russian in Russian across the writing and other classes. But see, when you're trying to practice your Russian speaking, and your teacher who is Russian wants to speak to your classmate who is Russian and is doing a joint degree and has picked Russian language for a fucking easy way out, so they don't need to do the full course on the other side. They can say, oh, well, I've got another degree that I'm working towards here, my Russian degree. So they were just chatting away. And it's like, what the fuck? How the fuck are we supposed to get there? I mean, like, the Chinese department was a lot better funded and was generally a lot better, but I remember directly after graduation, all of our families and all my classmates, I was like literally probably one of the only Scottish people who was in the course at that point. And like the other Scottish people were like upper class Scottish people. So I was like working class boy amongst all these like English, Southeast England and kind of posh Scotland. So we went up to this reception, and my mum and my dad are like chatting to some of my lecturers, and the lecturers were like swanning over and talking to all the families. And like after we left, we were there for maybe about half an hour, 45 minutes. After we left that reception, my mum and dad kind of looked at me like, see all those complaints that you've given us over the last like 4 years of how you really don't like any of your lecturers. I can see why now. I was like, Yep, it was bad. And speaking of posh people at uni who are classist, I was in. I mentioned I was in St Andrews yesterday. Is an English town in Scotland. That's the only way to describe
Yes.
St Andrews. And you know, I
The home of golf, if that helps to
yeah,
clarify for anyone.
yes, and it was. I went to the most Tory chippy I've
Mm,
ever been to in my fucking life. Like it was like it'd been talked up all day, right? We had a quick lunch. Well, I say lunch. It was more of a brunch thing at like 10:30, right? And then we were busy all day. We were doing lots of different things, and then we were gonna have this chippy at the end, and it was a takeaway, and we could like sit outside. So we decided to go for it, and it was just the most Tory fucking chippy in the world. They charged for sauce, and
it,
the salt and vinegar was
criminal.
self-serve, and it wasn't chippy sauce. It was like brown sauce that wasn't even like didn't even give you the bottle. They gave you it in a wee fucking tub. They gave you in a wee pretentious takeaway tub. Um, and the haggis was fucking tiny. Um, and they fucking had an explanation sign about what a single and what a supper was. And the guys behind us in the queue of this fucking Tory chippy was like, they personified everything I despise about like the sort of type of people that went to St Andrews. And I went for an induction day at St Andrews. I went to go and do that, like see what was on offer. You know, the kind of the days that you could visit as
Hmm.
a.
So did I. Yeah.
And like I went there and I remember being amazed at the pretentiousness of it, because the woman who was taking us around, um, she was talking about oh, and first years need to wear their robes like this, and then if in second year, if you're doing arts, you have to wear your robe like this on one shoulder. If you're doing science, you wear it like this on the other shoulder. And then third year you get a different robe, and then fourth year you get to wear your robe like this. I was like, I'm just not gonna wear the robe. It's like, what the fuck? But yeah, it was
It's like
very.
Hogwarts. It's
Oh,
very
it's
kind of,
wank.
it's, yeah. Um, I mean, even I feel Glasgow University is a wee bit like that to some degree.
Glasgow uni accent right there.
Yeah, it wasn't helped by the fact that I later went on to work there in the service side of it,
Oh.
and I was exposed to some of the,
Uh-huh.
I was working. I actually there's a wee cafe, there, in the library, and I used to work the weekends in there. I did So you get people coming in, that were studying for the weekend for tests and everything else. It was me and two other people that worked in there, but on the weekends I worked myself. And most of the people I was serving didn't know I had probably more qualifications than them.
Yeah.
And they treated you like garbage because you were a server, and they were, there was one lassie who I could not fathom how she was constantly breaking the coffee machine, because it was a self-serve coffee machine, and then you came up to my wee counter and then they told you what you had. Every time she used it, it would break. And it turned out that she was basically um, double tapping the espresso and then adding milk, which would cause the thing to flood, because the machine is set up so that it knows what big size the cups are, and if you go over that, it floods basically. Um, and she was doing that constantly and constantly flooding the thing. And I figured out what was happening, and I told her, if you want this, just take an espresso cup and then do this and then tip it in. And she's going, I think I'm smart enough to work a machine, and some of us actually care about what we do with our time. Like, she was just full on, like, really, like, I don't need to be talked down to by you, blah, 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 you work in
Oh.
service. And I eventually went, hen, like, I've got probably more degrees than you'll ever get in your life. Like, I have food science, I have my undergrad in English literature, linguistics, I have creative writing, I have all these different things. And she was kind of standing there going, well, how am I supposed to know that? You work behind a counter. That's the sort of people that go to St Andrews, and also
Glasgow and
to
Edinburgh.
Glasgow.
I mean,
Glasgow and Edinburgh. There's a very kind of snooty, well, I'm at university, so therefore I'm better than other people, which is horseshit.
Yeah.
Absolute horseshit.
There was a
Um,
there was a lassie in my year who she like her parents bought her a flat in second year, in her name. So she owned property when she was in second year at uni, and they would send her, I think it was something like 600 quid a week, for spending money and for doing things. And I remember like I worked all the way through uni. I did part
so did
time
I.
work, and it was like literally the only way I could kind of keep fed. Yeah, £600 a week on top of owning the flat. So it was like 600 to cover the utilities for that way. I don't fucking know. But yeah, it was that was the level of person, and she liked to talk about that a lot. But yeah, I remember she had some choice words for me when I'd said that like I'm off to my part time job, because I would finish a lecture at like 11, and then I would go off to my job. My Wednesdays were mainly free. I had a couple of lectures in the morning, and then I would go to work. And like she then like she's one of those folk that like she would look down on anyone with a job, but then when it got to having work experience in like the last year, suddenly she was all about having a part-time job, and
Mhm.
she worked as a shop girl in a club, which isn't the nicest job, like in general, as in shop girls have to put up with a lot of shit,
Mhm.
particularly patrons being creepy as fuck. But it was just the fact that like all of a sudden she wasn't above that anymore. Now she was like, oh, I really want some good work life experience, and I was like, what? You're doing this on Fridays and Saturdays, and you're basically getting steaming.
It's
Um,
the pulp song. It's
yeah,
the common people song that always used to come into my head because
yep.
do you remember the article a while ago which was I lied to my friends because if they knew the truth they'd hate me? And she's like, actually, David Cameron's quite a nice bloke, but you can't say that because you'll become a social pariah. And it's like, as you rightfully should. Like she was
Yeah,
very much like, I lie and say I have no money because I don't want people to be bitter and want things from me. And it's like, okay, but that's you judging people, and
yeah,
also maybe they're not that way because you have money. Maybe they're that way because you're a cunt. Like that's
yeah.
basically just. But it was the whole time I was reading the article, I just had Pulp's common people in my head, and it
Aye,
was the whole line about how you'll never understand because your dad can pick up the phone and stop everything and make your life better again. There's so many people who don't have that option, and
yeah.
yet academia is geared towards the people that do,
Mm,
and it's really, I don't know. For me, I was the first one in my family to go to university. I mean, out of all my cousins, out of everybody, I was the first one to go to university, and it was seen as a big thing. It
mm,
was a big, big achievement. My parents didn't even finish secondary school. My parents got pulled out of secondary school to work because that was the only way to support your family. And for them, it was a really, really proud, crowning moment. And I felt such guilt because I hated it.
yep.
I
I'm
felt
yep,
such guilt
yep.
because I'm surrounded by people who don't understand that for a lot of people this is a gateway to a job. For most of them,
Yeah,
it was just you do it because it's mummy and daddy did it, you
yeah.
know,
I
or
mean,
it was
I,
it's what is expected of you to show that you're worth something. And I remember thinking,
mm,
well, that's wrong.
yeah. I mean,
It's
there
really
is.
really wrong.
I'm the exact same. Like, see, I continually get emails from Edinburgh Uni every so often, talking about how, oh, would the alumni like to make a contribution?
Yeah, it's like
And I'm like, for the 4 years of shit that I mean, I went to the fucking mental health people in my fourth year, really struggling, and they were basically like, you just sound a wee bit stressed. Have you decided? Have you tried going for a walk? Like, I go for a walk every fucking day. I walk to uni. I go there, and then I walk in the evenings. That's what I was doing. But yeah, Jesus. Anyway,
yeah,
sorry, to
yeah.
circle back to the question. Obviously, I love our tangents. Do you have like were you read to as a kid? I imagine you
Yes,
were. And
constantly.
did you have like a favorite like kids book? Like,
It was Peter Pan. I actually could, if my dad skipped a word, I knew that he had skipped a word. Um, so it was Peter Pan was my favourite one, and not the Disney version, but the J.M. Barrie one. And then after that, it was my dad would actually remake stories for me. So instead of having the Three Little Bears, we had the Three Little Bears from Govan. And it was he'd tell stories about
that's
the
amazing.
bears living in a council flat and everything else, and there was the bears getting the bus to go Easter House, and it was just my dad was great. My dad was the person that kind of taught me how to tell stories, and he'd do all sorts of things. He'd do he did. I later found out, so this is quite funny. My dad is he used to write smutty stories for people at work. That was how he thought. That was how he entertained people. He would write things like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it was things like Snow White was well, it wasn't as wholesome as Disney, put it that way. And he would write things like that that were kind of
R-rated Disney.
R-rated. He did things like that, and it was when I told him, well, actually, the books I'm writing, you probably don't want to read them because they're smutty, they've got stuff in it. And my mother's going, I don't know where she gets it from, blah blah blah. And my dad was kind of sitting there going, like it was apparently me just continuing on a family tradition. But my dad was the one that taught me how to tell stories just from the things that he would take tropes and subvert them, because it was my favorite. When I was growing up, I had audiobooks, and it was the Three Little Bears and Goldilocks, and they all sounded. The bears spoke with very very posh accents. The bears were very educated for being bears. They were very English and snobby, and my dad didn't like that, so my dad did the Three Little Bears from Govan. He came up with nursery rhymes like the teddy bear's picnic was the teddy bears get their picks nicked because they were bears that used to go down mines, and he redid all these things, and he loved to flip tropes on their head and just reinvent stories for me. And I think if anyone's read any of my stuff, you will see that
See it shining
I've
through.
absorbed that into my core. That it's, well, here's a story. How do we make it interesting? How do you flip it? How do you make it reflect your reality and not, you know, the kind of the way things have always been? And it was always fun. But my dad was the one that read to me constantly. It was all like the Enid Blyton books and everything else, and you could see him cringing when he was reading those because they're so very posh and completely not relatable to a kid that grows up, running around Townhead and all these things. Like he's like when as a child, on the one hand it's escapism, on the other hand it's also ripe with imperialism and all these things.
Yeah.
So his joy was taking those things and making them into something that were relatable to what we wanted. And the other famous one was he would tell me like the Lord of the Rings, and he would put girls into it so that I would have someone to look up. Like he would put girl hobbits into like the Fellowship of the Rings because he was worried that I wouldn't see myself as someone that could save the world. And he was very very kind of instrumental in developing that kind of the representation in stories matters. And I don't think he even realized he was doing it. But he was kind of making sure that I would always see myself in fiction. He would always make sure that I could see myself as the hero, or because he knew himself growing up, because he grew up in Govan growing up, and he would read like Biggles and stuff like that, and he's going, well, I'm never going to be an upper class hero. I'm never going to be someone that has I'm never going to be Lord whatever that saves the day. So that was kind of, he would go out of his way to find different stories to read to me, and it did leave a mark. And hi Dorian, I just see all the emojis, but it was, yeah, he was constantly reading, and I think it was because no one read to him, which is really sad. But he was kind of he was a big library fan, hugely. He used to go to the library after school, and the first time he realized he was allowed to take books home, that was a revolution for him. That opened up the world of imagination to him, and that kind of completely changed his life. And he wanted to make sure I also had the kind of the same gift that he had, which was the gift of not just words and literacy, but the gift of having your own imagination and being able to change the world through your own words. And it stuck, obviously.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I
For a
was gonna
major
say.
degree.
Yeah, it sounds like he did a good job. To be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
Nah, that's cool. Because I think that it was my mum that read mainly to me growing up, and about like the earliest book I remember. There was a really good one. It was like it was a kid's book, like kids book, and it was great. But it was called like a dark house,
Oh, the
and
skeleton one.
it,
Yeah.
no, it wasn't a skeleton
No?
one though. It like apparently the skeleton one. I'll try to look it up there to find the name of it, but it's not a skeleton. It was like it would do the dark house on the dark street, and
Mm-hmm.
it would go through it all. But at the end of the book, it was a wee mouse. It was really
Oh,
cute.
yeah.
But it was that. But then as we no, it wasn't funny bones. Eh, but like eventually we got to reading all of the kind of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But I remember like my favorite one from that was Horse and His Boy, which I think is like the
Mm-hmm.
third book. So yeah, it was really good. I don't know, Sky. I'd have to have a wee look after the
Mm-hmm.
stream. But
No, my
yeah,
mum was the one with flashcards. She would my mum
ah,
was the one. She's the reason I see words everywhere because she would randomly like, "What does this word mean? What does this word say?" You know, and I was like, "Jesus Christ!" But you know, it's. I also got my love of reading from her because she would
mm,
absolutely, you know, if you asked for a book, she'd go, "Ah, on you go." You know, it was never
yeah,
restricted in the way that toys were a kind of a you know, toys were fine, but you know, it was more likely if you asked for a book, you'd get a book.
mm,
And it would be she'd take us into like Waterstones and everything else, and you know, she'd say however many you can carry is what you can take, basically. Which is fine when
yeah,
you're wee and you've only got wee stubby arms, but see when you start getting older and you've actually got some strength in you, that's a bad thing to say to a teenager. That is.
yeah.
But she still honoured it. She was still absolutely yep, as long as you're reading, you know.
Nah, see, it was like on
So,
my, it was my dad sorted me out with my times tables. Like it was every well twice a week I'd go through to Dunfermline to do fencing, and my times tables were trained into me from a very young age to the point where it was like I would just be able to recite all the times tables, and then I'd get to stick my iPod in and listen to music the rest of the way.
mhm.
But it was a really good way of training it. To the point where I weirdly look forward to doing it with a potential kid of mine in the future. I'm looking forward to doing the times tables, and I'm looking forward to doing the languages as well. Um,
That was my mum as well was that kind of she used to make us do times tables constantly,
mm,
just like you had to memorize everything. I don't remember any of them now, but I always remember spelling. And there was actually a really funny story about because she did the same thing with my wee brother, and there was one time. You know when you did the spelling test at the end of the week, so they give you new words every week to learn, and at
mm.
the end of the week they test you on how to spell them and everything else. There was one week my brother was sitting there, and the teacher looked over his shoulder and she hadn't even started talking yet and he'd already written the words down. She's going, you have to wait for me to say them. And he's going, why? They're right. And she's going, how do you, and he's going, and she says, I don't need you. I've got my mum. That was his response.
I don't need you.
And it was because I don't need to wait for you. I've got mum. I know all these words because she made it so that we, you know, no matter what, would know how to spell things. And it stuck with me. Like there's still words that I can still kind of, you know, if you know, it's things that are embedded in my memory, and it comes from my mum making me recite things over and over and over again because that was how she wanted to make sure that we had the kind of the things that she and my dad never had, which was a solid education and just kind of also you know sort of fun with it almost.
Ah,
So it was that kind of they wanted to make it into a game, and you can learn for some kids when something's a game, you learn it so much better.
yeah, 100%. I
You
mean, it's
know.
sort of like the gamification of stuff before like apps tried to do it, you know?
Mhm.
And like it was turning it into like a game for. I mean, it was my mum that did the spelling for me, and doing
Mhm.
like spelling tests and stuff like that. Because it was like a spelling test every day at school or something. There was like to be honest, I can imagine for some kids it was probably hell, but like my mum was just really good with it. The one thing that I hated though was when I had to write out the word several times in homework. You know, you get sent away with spelling homework, and it was like write out the one word like 6 times, which I get does just train your writing, but like yeah, there was nothing I hated more. It was the same with the workbooks that you used to get, where you had to like trace the actual letter. Like it was just so tedious because like I could do it once and it was in. I didn't need to like do it tons and tons of times. Learning. I still write in cursive. Like I'm used to doing that. Russian cursive's another fucking beast though. Is terrifying. Ru-
I saw
like
Russian cursive once,
Russian.
and I was staring at it going, "Ah, that's no."
Yeah. It's like it just all looks the same. There's like specific things, but it all just looks the exact
It's
same.
like when your doctor scrolls in your prescription and it's
Yeah.
illegible, and you're like, "How does the pharmacist understand it?" It's that kind of yeah, but
Block
it's
capitals. That's
yeah.
printing. You're excellent at printing. Um, but yeah, that was yeah, that was life. That was early school life.
Yeah, it's weird to. It's funny because you told me you were going to ask some of these questions. I was like, I haven't thought about any of this for literally decades.
I
But
know.
it's funny the things that are actually stuck in my head.
Mm.
It's the things that stick with you, and you don't even realize it until someone points out that it's very obvious. I mean, I
It's,
think we were scrolling past something there, and Sky was like, "Well, I can see where the Parliament from Hunger Pangs came from. Yeah, it
mm.
comes from every dick teacher I ever had." But it yeah, like the whole thing was like the words everywhere. I don't view that as you know weird to me that I see words everywhere because that was just how my childhood was. It's only when I tell other people that I see words everywhere that they kind of go, "That sounds like a mental health thing." Like
Yeah.
it's just like don't know, maybe it is, but it's
Panicorn's asking a question. Why did I learn Russian? Good fucking question. Wish I knew the answer to that. No, I'd been interested in Russia since I was quite wee. Um, like from about so in primary school, you don't really learn much about World War II in primary school until, at least for me, it was primary seven. Like primary seven was when you actually had a select slot for like history, and in primary seven we did Japan and we did World War II, and we had to do projects on both. So for Japan, I learned all about the samurai, including, and really, really embarrassingly, um, I had to, as part of my project, I decided to have a section where I wrote a letter that a young boy would write to his granny, and the granny replying. But this is like way back in ancient Japan.
mhm.
So naturally, the letter was in English, because I didn't know any other language, and I just wrote a really like cringe-worthy letter about like this wee boy writing, because obviously I knew that like sushi was a great thing, so I was like, I made the granny out to be like a fisher, and she would catch tuna and she would make tuna sushi. So the boy was enthusiastically asking about the samurai and sending that letter to his grandma, and the grandma was replying saying, "I've sent some sushi for you." It was cringe as fuck. But the World War II one was interesting because basically everyone in my class, their projects, they were either going to do the evacuees, which was like the common thing to do.
Mhm.
Some of them did just general like air raids and the Anderson shelters and all that sort of stuff. Me, I was like, fuck that, I'm going to do my project on Stalingrad, which is like one of the most pivotal battles of World War II, for those of you who don't know. So I was really, really interested in Russia from that like side of things. I read tons and tons of books about the history of it, and like I don't know, it was just something I thought was quite cool to know. I suppose I suppose to kind of speak back to Joy's point earlier, I was kind of like following the dopamine. I was like Russian just seemed like a cool language to know. Um, who would have thought that current events would transpire?
Mhm.
But like yeah, when like I was always interested in languages in general. Through high school, I studied a whole bunch of languages. I did, like, I'd learned a bit of French in primary school, but I wasn't very good at it. But then you had to take French in first year of high school, and I remember I had the opportunity. You had to write a wee application letter to the school, to we all got sent it. So basically, all of the primary schools got a letter that was asking like select students from each class, primary 7 class, to apply to be part of a class in first year. And I think they would have really just accepted anyone, but they wanted people to actually voice their I would like to study this, and it was for a Latin class. And this school that I went to was not private. So just to outline that, because the moment I say Latin and the moment I tell people that I did fencing, they think I'm from a completely different background. But it was Latin that really unlocked all of my kind of language capability. It helped me with English right away, being able to understand where English words came from. You could see the links. But then, of course, it naturally helped with like French as well. Ended up taking Spanish at some point, so I took Spanish during high school. Did studied ancient Greek because obviously early letters in the ancient Greek alphabet helped inform the Cyrillic alphabet, because it was like kind of saints helped construct the Cyrillic alphabet, and then I had the opportunity to do Chinese in my 6th year, and that really was what got me into. There's a group called the Scottish Confucius Institute, and I was lucky enough to kind of apply for a scholarship there, and that was what first got me over to China. And like basically, so I didn't go to uni straight out of high school. Instead, I went to live in China for a year, as you do at 17 years old. And then I came back, and then I started uni, and I went through the Edinburgh uni system, where I got really, really jaded because I was just running into posh people all the time. So, but yeah, that's the kind of reason behind Russian, and I think, basically because I thought it was cool when I was really young, and no one said, what are you going to do with it? I was like, well, I'll know Russian then and it'll be cool. So
I mean, that's kind of something you really do learn the best when you're interested in something, though.
yeah.
And the phrase I use is chasing your dopamine. Is especially if you are some sort of flavor of neurodivergent, that can be the key between getting an education and completely bombing out of the system. And I really don't think there's any, I hate the fact that, they go through kind of like, oh, well, what are you at university for? Oh, you'll never get a job with that.
Yeah,
You'll never, and I'm going, well, maybe I don't want that for a job. Maybe I want to learn the thing just because I want to learn the thing.
I think that was the thing that pissed me off so fucking much in my final year at uni, right? Now, bearing in mind, I had a fucking goal of what I wanted to do straight out of high school. Like, I wanted to go and do the thing in China. The idea, obviously, was back in the referendum times, and I was like, I want to be Scotland's ambassador in China, right? That was my fucking goal. Obviously, things didn't transpire that way because Scotland voted no. However, it was still like I'm going to prepare myself and go that route. And then 4th year of university, and this kind of, to me, like, I had an idea of what I wanted to do all the way through my time in uni, all the way throughout my time in uni, and I suppose it just speaks to how other people in the class were like, but I found it so fucking condescending when, having studied 2 languages, the careers advisor came into my class one day and was like, do you want to be a translator with your language, or do you want to be a teacher? And I was like, oh, is that it? Is that my 2 fucking choices?
That's your options.
Oh, right, okay. I didn't know it was limiting me that much. Why the fuck would have I picked it then? It was just frustrating. So, also, thanks Wartech and Copper Badge for the follows. Sorry, we've get sucked into conversation. It's sometimes hard to find the gap to be like, thanks for the follow.
Yeah, I really don't like the idea that you only do education to get a job.
Yeah.
Like, because there's so many, like, although I did ultimately end up doing something with my degree, I very easily been happy not.
Mm.
Some of my happiest jobs were actually working in um, customer service, like when people were nice and when my bosses stood up for you. I was
Yeah.
actually really happy in those jobs, and it because it wasn't as mentally taxing to me because it was easy for my ADHD to just
Mm.
bounce around and do the thing. But I'm also someone who has never had a career goal. Um, the whole idea that I'd go into teaching was something that was instilled in me because of teachers telling me, well, if you're going to do English, you're going to have to be a teacher because it's not useful for anything else. Um, which I don't think that's true. Um, but to me, it's also not been relevant. So it's, I always get people asking me for career advice and how do you get into this? How do you get into that? My response to that is, you can do everything right, you can get all the degrees, you can do all the things, and you can
Mm-hmm.
still not end up in the job that you want because the market is so saturated with people who have degrees. The only reason I got into editing was because I knew somebody. Otherwise, I never would have got to do the competency test to get into that publishing house. That's it. My
Mm.
degree ultimately did not matter. It was the person I knew. It's been the same for a lot of my jobs. It was I knew somebody who was able to go, oh, do you want to have, like you seemed as if you know this. Do you want to come and like give it a shot? And I go, yeah, sure, whatever. But it's always very disheartening to me because there's young people going, what qualifications do I get to end up doing what you're doing? And my response to that is, none of my qualifications ultimately matter. The life experience I gained from doing them was
Was
more important,
yeah.
and gaining friendships and being able to network with people was more important. I would not have gotten any of the chances I've had through just my degree, if I hadn't also gained the life experience I got. And I could have got that life experience from doing literally anything else. You know,
Yeah.
it's yeah. I mean, and I have a food science degree as well, which ironically turned out to be really great when I developed my cell disorder because it means I can understand on a fundamental level what is happening to me with food,
Mm.
but it didn't actually help me with get a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was just like, okay, well I'll do this because it might help me advance through certain careers. No, it didn't really because everybody's got degrees, everybody's vying for the same
Mm.
limited jobs. That it's ultimately the thing that got me where I am is just bouncing around and not being afraid to try things. And it's I mean, I'm obviously also I come from a place of privilege. I'm a white cis woman, um, and I come from a background where I did have the support of my family, so it's obviously easier to bounce around when you have some of that. But
Yeah.
the idea that you can only get anywhere worthwhile through education, I don't think is.
Nah. I
I think
mean,
education has to be done for love of learning.
yeah.
I don't think you can enforce it to be, well, everyone has to do this. Um, but
SMG is
but joy, no one wants to work. Um, we want work. We just want respect, and we want our time to be worth. We want to be paid what we're worth, and we're not getting that. We've not been getting it for decades.
mm.
Um, there's not a single person I went to university with that I know of who actually has a career with
Mm.
that's relevant to their degree. I think I might actually be the first, and I did it by accident.
Hey.
I did it because Tumblr tricked me into writing a book. So that's kind of how that worked out for me. But there's so many people I know whose none of their jobs are relevant to what they did at uni, and it just kind of shows you that it's more of a, can you afford to do this thing? Can you afford the expensive piece of paper that says you are worth even interviewing? Which I think is a bad way of doing anything. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just capitalism sucks the joy out of almost everything. Yeah, it really does. And it's the thank you for putting the pig head in there. But the I think everything needs to be restructured. I think everything needs to be burned to the ground and rebuilt because it's just
Yeah, I kind of
yeah.
just sorry, just touching on SMG's point. Sorry, the chat's moving really quickly. So,
Everything's going really
um,
fast. Yeah.
SMG's point was is the snobbery only particular to like the arts side of uni because they did maths at St Andrews and they enjoyed it. And I think with STEM, it's a different type of snobbery that you'll
Mm-hmm.
get. I think I I got in trouble for making a comment about STEM on Tumblr, and I think it's now got about 6,000 notes on it, and people are calling furries Nazis in the notes. Like, it's just completely fucking spiraled into
Derailed completely.
just fucking just a massive pile of shit. So like I basically posted that like I've got an issue with some attitudes in STEM because like there's when you get to a point where you are just, I think, to be honest, humanities and a more STEM subjects do actually have a lot to learn from each other, because I think um like the problem that I've got with a lot of STEM stuff is that sometimes it's just like they just want to, like, they don't put a lot of thought into why they're doing things sometimes, particularly when it comes to like computer science, right? Like computer
Mm-hmm.
science is like notorious for this shit. The tech bros, they do just develop stuff, and like it might come from a genuine like interest of like, oh, can I do this? But then, you know, there's always going to be someone out there being like, how can I fucking weaponize what you've just like programmed? And whether that's, fucking drone missile launchers, or whether it's, something horrible like facial recognition or anything like that, there is a particular attitude within STEM fields where like a lot of the time the ethics of it um, aren't really like, yeah, an Excel dev once told you, we're not here to solve problems effectively, we're here to solve them interestingly. Explains a lot about Excel. Well, I mean, so one of the things, and it's kind of my experience of doing work in technology, I worked for a technology company up until like the kind of past 3 weeks. But in that space, one of the biggest problems is, um, and like you always hear like developers moan about project managers and stuff like that, but sometimes it is like herding cats, um,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you don't want someone who's super knowledgeable about like the tech, the underlying tech, because what you find in whether it's your you know your Steve Jobs, your Bill Gates, your Larry Ellisons, or whatever it is, they've built fantastic products, but there's not a lot of like underlying engineering principle to it, in the same way that um like the flow of water's kind of looked at, where like every pipe is made to a specific specification, and it needs to pass this kind of regulation, and all the rest of it. When you get into the world of software development, you always talk about, oh, we'll fucking hack it together. And we won't really think about how things are built, and then one dev leaves and suddenly half the fucking knowledge of the company's left because a developer's gone to another job, and they need to get another developer in who does things a completely different way and needs to know how to decipher it. So standards becomes an issue there as well. But whether it's facial recognition, I mean the fucking the post that I made about where it was like these tech bros had basically reinvented a sundial, right? And it was a circle on the wall that had lights pointing into it. And what you had to do to tell the time was go up to the wall and put your finger in the circle, and it would tell you the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fun gadget, right? Would like they turned it into an actual product, but that to me is more of like a young science fair thing that you try and do once, not something that you try and sell. I would rather just have a fucking clock. It wasn't like it was a constantly plugged in device. It was lights, so it was just burning energy, and it's like for a less efficient clock. Why
Mm-hmm.
why would I do that? So yeah, there's a wee bit of that I just take issue with, and at the same time though, I think humanities has a bunch to learn from STEM. I think like,
Yeah.
see, I would love to have injected some sort of STEM discipline into my, you know, my Chinese silent film lecturer. Just give him a bit of like life and discipline about how to do things, because
Mm-hmm.
like, and I think that's hard. I mean, this is kind of probably back to me enjoy being creatives or influencers, what the hell you want to call us. I don't know. You're an author. You actually have a title. But like, you know, there needs to be that balance, I suppose, when you're editing or when you're like, you know, redrafting. Like, you are like, obviously you want to keep some kind of creative tangents in, but there does come a point where you need that almost engineering discipline to go,
Yeah,
right,
you have to
we're
know when
cutting
something
this.
works and when it doesn't work.
Yeah. STEM
Yeah,
should be requiring
it's
way more ethics. Yes, I agree.
yes. And also, what Rain's other comment was, I had a STEM degree that was required an ethics course, but it was useless because it was taught by a STEM professor, not an ethics professor.
Yep. Fuck's sake.
Yeah,
You
but
had
it's
one
just
job.
yeah. You need to have a good blend of things for things to actually be efficient, and to also be interesting as well. It's just who dreams of labour, not I. Literally, yeah. The whole I always resented the what do you want to work at when you grow up, and my response is I don't want to work, and that's seen as lazy, but it's going no, it's not. It's literally just being sick of the system that's around us. There's
Yeah.
no
I
I
think,
don't know.
see, the thing, the annoying thing is I don't take that view. I really want to work, but I want to work at things, and I know we're probably arriving at the same answer here, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I, I absolutely want to work. I love working. I love throwing myself at like projects and things like that. Um, you know, and it's the sort of thing like when I was working full time, um, you know, coming and, you know, if I wasn't thinking about that, I was thinking about my other work, which I counted as, you know, running Eye for Scotland and doing streaming and, you know, trying to do all the things that I do for that. So like I see that as work, like, because I'm always trying to like pursue goals with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I mean, like maybe me gaming by myself, I would probably say is like a hobby, I suppose. But like when I'm streaming, I regard that as work because like that's the attitude I take to it. Like I want to, you know, I want to grow the channel. Please follow. I want to, you know, I want to like keep the community going. I want to like try and work on, you know, different things. Yeah, I want to try and do more YouTube, even though I'm very lackluster with that. You know, it's all this kind of stuff. Like I count it as work, and that's not a negative thing. It's just, but then I suppose I'm kind of removed from a kind of semi-capitalist thing when I'm doing that work,
Yeah.
because
And it's also, as Panicorn says, I don't want to be paid for my labour. I want universal basic income so that I can work at the things I love. That's
yeah,
the thing. I mean, there was a post that was on Tumblr the other day, which if you had universal basic income, what would you be doing? And my response was, I'd be doing the exact same thing. I'd be writing books, but I would not have as many panic attacks over finances because if I don't write books, I can't eat. Like it's that kind of like I want to do the things that I love. I want to develop my skills. I want to be sociable. I want to work with other people. I want to achieve goals, but I also want security,
yeah.
and none of us have that. It used to be like a one person income. You could own your house and you could support 4 kids, a dog, and go on vacations, all these things.
Yep.
Where's that gone?
I think
Like,
pretty much in the last episode, I think we asked chat, it was like, who is a month's paycheck away from really struggling to pay for anything? Like from a savings perspective, I think lots of us have like effectively nothing in the tank, and it's like the moment we get paid each month, it goes out the other side. I mean,
mm-hmm,
me and Jessica were gobsmacked at our fucking energy bill. We upped our energy bill payments, and we were chipping away at the debt. I mean, bear in mind this is like summer now, so this is the
mm-hmm,
month that we're not using heating, and we're chipping away at it. With the energy price rises in the UK right now, what we are now doing isn't covering. We raised it to like 160 quid a month to cover gas and electric, and now we're over 160 quid a month in that. So we're actually still adding on to the debt that we're supposed to be paying off during this month because we don't have the heating on. We've not got the
mm-hmm.
gas on at all. It's now just the electricity bills, which is horrible. So yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the idea that nobody wants to work is also false.
Oh yeah,
People do
definitely.
want to work. People do want to achieve things. The idea that only lazy people don't want to work is also extremely ableist,
Mm.
because you never actually know what people are struggling with. You know,
Um,
there could be there was a whole thread I saw on Reddit the other day. And it was, oh my, you know, there's nothing physically wrong with her, but she never does this or she never does that. And I responded. I very rarely respond to Reddit stuff, but I responded to this one going, it sounds to me as if she's having mental health problems.
mm.
Has anyone talked to her about getting help with that? Because to me, it sounded like she was having extreme anxiety, and it was presenting itself as laziness.
Mm.
Um, it was presenting itself as not engaging with working because they had extreme anxiety. And the response I got from the person was, that's just an excuse. I'm going,
Mm.
no, it's a form of health. It's a form of healthcare. And if you're not getting your healthcare needs met, it can be extremely difficult to work on anything.
Yeah.
And it's really telling to me that it's, you know, well, people are just lazy and don't want to work. Is it, or are people crushed down and depressed and they can't bring themselves to take abuse at a job that doesn't even pay rent anyway?
I mean,
You
there
know?
was actually an article published in the Spectator today where it was like, there's why are 5 million Britons out of work? And the guy was kind of saying, there's so many jobs going at airports right now. There's so many service jobs at airports. Why aren't all these people filling out all the airports? All of our airports should be completely staffed, 100%. All the shops inside, all the rest of it. And then the like all of the comments were naturally, well, one, you've got to own the car to get to the fucking
Mm-hmm.
airport. You know, depending on how long. I mean, that's potentially a 2 hour commute out to an airport. So you know, you either live near the airport or you're fucking in the city and you have to get out to the airport. Which you've then got to pay for. You're not getting paid for your commute. You're not, you know, you're potentially spending 3 hours of your work wages on travel to the work. You know, how's that fucking feasible, you know? Um, so yeah, I mean that's the again though, that's the attitude of the people who like your assistant, like your teaching assistant.
I
You
mean,
know,
you
it's
need
the
money to make money.
yeah,
If it's true for these billionaires who make investments, you need money to make money. It's true for the rest of us too, who need to get to the jobs, who
yeah,
need to have food so that we can function, so that we can rest and live and, you know, just have our basic human needs met. Like, if you can't afford to take care of your basic human needs, you can't afford to work.
yep,
But then you also can't afford those things because you're not working. It's just the idea that it's laziness and it's people not wanting to work is just so detrimental and just so insidious to imply that people deserve what is happening to them when it is purely the result of late stage capitalism falling apart. Um, and it's just
I
they're
find that
framing it
we always end up talking about this, Joy.
to, but you know, because it's so relevant, because it's so
Yeah,
relevant to the
I
things that
know.
we're both dealing with, and um, it's just so, I don't know, it's never been like, I was talking to my mother and she was like, "Oh yeah, well, we were recovering from the Great Depression," and I'm going, "I've had 4 recessions in my lifetime, and I'm not 40 yet." And she's like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, well, we had the Great Depression." I'm going, "You can call it whatever you want." Well, who though?
here she
What do you want?
is.
What do you want, not? Huh? But you can call it the Great Depression all you want. It doesn't deter from the fact that my generation's had four depressions on par with it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Holly, where'd you go?
Here, there, and everywhere.
She's got zoomies.
Oh, she's
Anyway,
behind you. She emerged.
she's got
Um,
zoomies.
I did like she just trotted off the background there, just behind you.
As
Um,
soon as ETD went walking past, she's gone.
no, that's cool. So yeah, remember when your dad used to read to you? We're going into our anti-capitalist rant once again.
But even then, I
Um,
blame my dad for that because you can't get told a story like the Three Bears from Govan living in a council flat growing up and not being
have
completely
that as
radicalized
yeah,
against capitalism. It's
yeah.
such a core aspect of my, my internalized sense of morality. I think.
That's the way to do
Yes, Holly is adorable all of the time, especially even when she, um, even when she's worried that she's going to shit the bed and she flings herself bodily off the side. That happened the other night. She was having an upset tummy and she suddenly got up and she ran towards the edge of the mattress. Didn't use her ramp to get down. She just flung herself like the Kimbo, skidded over the hardwood floor and just scrabbled off towards the back door and left me and Nikki going, right, we need to get up and let her out then because otherwise she's probably going to have an accident. But she was determined not to poop in our bed. Absolutely.
It was
just,
nice
nope,
of her, doing you a
I know,
favour.
it was, yeah. But yeah, it was just that going back to things, it is such a core aspect of my sense of right and wrong. And it's very hard not to talk about it every week when it literally feels like every single week something's gotten worse.
Yeah.
Like every single week, we're like, what will we talk about this week? Oh, something else is on fire. Fantastic.
On the bright side, Tesla shares are down. So,
yes.
So
and he's also tanking Twitter shares as well, and someone's suing him for that, which is great.
Yeah, but it's like apparently he's losing a lot of his workforce as well because he's been a dick. Not that I want to talk. I don't want to talk about Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it. I can't. I feel like it's just a thing now. What's Elon Musk up to this week? I wish I couldn't care, but he's a prick. So yeah.
He's honestly not worth oxygen at this point. Like if he wants to launch himself into space, that's great. Send him up there without oxygen. Fantastic. But it's just.
I'll tell you something. Sorry, go on.
No, I'm just gonna say he's part of the problem.
Yeah, 100%. Moving back to something else, maybe a cheerier topic actually, where I got this guy yesterday. So obviously you've heard the story about the Tory Chippy. However, beforehand we went to St Andrew's Aquarium, where my sister's boyfriend works as a aquaist. I didn't know that was a job title, but an aquaist. So that's like the kind of aquarium scientist, not just like a kind of.
Sounds like a good job.
Not just like a keeper, but like actually does like. Unfortunately, has to get involved in like the autopsies of like fish and other animals. But like for an aquarium, I was quite impressed with the different types of animals they had because I never thought that meerkats were aquatic, and they're not. But they have meerkats there. And they were like fantastic. They were like scurrying here, there, and everywhere. They also had these wee cute monkeys that I cannot remember the name. They were tiny. They begin with M. I was like Marquette's a bird. Something. I don't know. But they were. Yeah, no. Nah, I was already saying meerkats. I was talking about monkeys. Can't remember the name of the monkeys. Nah, they're tiny babies. Nah. Monkeys beginning with M.
I'm gonna have to Google that now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. No, it's not. It was like a wee tiny monkeys. Not what? Typed in. No, come on. It's got to be marmosets. They've got marmosets.
Nah.
That's it. I don't know why, but whenever I click on the internet, you freeze, Joy. So apologies. But yeah, marmosets. So marmosets are really, really cute and funny. So the two that they had there, one was called Charlie and the other one was called Lola. And they were both rescued. So one of the biggest problems facing marmosets is the fact that they people like them as pets, and people then keep them in bird cages and don't actually give them like room to roam around. So unfortunately, both of these marmosets have slight bone development problems, so they're slightly more hunched over, just because they've been kept in cages, which is really, really shit. But they're in this really nice big enclosure now in St Andrew's Aquarium, and but the really funny thing is that Lola's like 12 and Charlie's like 5. And my sister's boyfriend was telling us about them, and one of the things that's like if a marmoset likes you, it'll stick out its tongue at you. And this is like if it's attracted to you and likes you as a thing to look at. And Lola really likes sticking her tongue out to everyone. I got Lola tonguing me, and she also stuck the tongue out at my dad as well. But the thing is that Charlie gets really, really like defensive because he thinks that Lola's his girlfriend, and what he
Mhm.
does is marmosets are like super duper expressive, so he runs over. Like Lola was like right at the edge of the thing, and she was just looking out at all the people, and Charlie fucking bolts over to her, and they just have this really like frowny face, and if they really don't like you, they'll turn round and flash their testicles at you. So I got to see
Aggressive.
I got to see a marmoset's testicles yesterday, which was interesting, but yeah, they also have seals there. They've got penguins. They've got a jellyfish. They've got a snapping turtle. They've got tons and tons of stuff, and it's amazing because it's actually a really small aquarium, but it's split over like 3 floors, um, and it all kind of intertwined. The only problem is that the building's so old, that like accessibility is a bit of a problem because they
Mhm.
literally can't install any sort of elevator or anything like that. So it is a wee bit of a problem, and it's like something that they're aware of. They've got a ramp that allows you into kind of like the top level, and you can go down to like the seals and stuff. But unfortunately, like the way that the building is, you just can't, like, you need to have stairs. You couldn't make them a ramp because it's too small. But anyway, it was really good fun. It was a good day out. And of course, it's really good when you've got like a guide. So it's like, again, he's
Mhm.
he's, he's like he's an aquarist, and he was working there at the time. So he was doing the talks at every kind of feeding session. Also, if you want to know who are the most brutal eaters, like meerkats rip things to fucking shreds. Like meerkats are insane. I mean, like they are literally fed like cut up chicks. The chicks are dead, but like seeing them like grab a chick and run away with it, it was like we did get a warning beforehand.
Just
He was,
grim.
yeah, but it's like they also like chase locusts about and stuff. And the way that the meerkats work is like they're all the way that my sister's boyfriend described them is they're all fat men, like fat old men. Because like if you have like the majority of meerkat enclosures will only ever be one sex, because if you put someone else in there, it becomes like a fight basically. And if they had a mix of male and female, it would just become like super territorial and they'd be super aggressive. So they're all fat old men, and some of their teeth are beginning to fall out. So what what they're supposed to what they normally eat is things like they'll have fruit, they'll have protein, but recently when it's come to the fruit, they've had to like steam the fruit so it's mushy enough for them to eat because they're,
Oh,
they're all old. So no, it was good fun though. So if you're ever in St Andrews, avoid the chippies, but go to the aquarium because
go to the
it
aquarium.
is nice.
2 seconds. Do you need help taking her out? Is that what's happening? Or is she just hyper? She's just hyper? Okay. The dog's running past every 30 seconds. Just absolutely bonkers. Hi.
Sometimes you've just got the zoomies.
My question for I actually almost got answered, which was how, your degrees and everything else you get into. But my other question was going to be, um, what got you into doing the politics blog? Like, what started I for Scotland? Like
Oh.
you've touched on it briefly that
Mm.
you're really into it when you were in secondary school, but what kind of prompted you to actually start the Tumblr? And I'm actually going to ask you wait for 30 seconds because I need more water because I'm starting to
To be honest,
dehydrate.
so that
So,
I'm gonna run and grab. Yeah,
so
I'm gonna go and
be
get me
right
some
back
water
in a
as well.
minute.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that. Okay, be right back, folks.
Okay.
Hello. Is Joy back yet? No. That's fine. That's fine. I is 25. Sorry, I need to scroll back up. What's going on here? So, Joy and I are gone. Post cursed memes, hydration stations. Dun, dun, dun. Who asked my age? Who was talking about my age? Because if so, I'm too old.
The chicken away from my desk too.
Sorry, did you say I'm 19? What the fuck? No? I imagine you're joking, Aurascala. Keita, Return of the King. I like you. Hi, Joy.
Hello.
And we're back. But apparently there was a discussion about my age in chat.
Really?
Yeah. And I suppose it's like you know, having ran a politics blog, I'm probably 75 years old. But yes, I think I'm 25. I think I'm around that. I think I'm 26 this year.
You were exactly 10 years younger than me, so yes.
Cool. I can't believe your age for a second, Joy. I think that's a lie. I think I'd, like.
Thank you.
A fucking push. I'll give you 29, but get yourself to pits.
35 and very happy to be here.
Now I need to participate in a shoulder press. You don't need to do this though, Joy. You're good.
If I try, my shoulder will probably pop out, so thank you for excluding me from that.
Unless you feel like a Holly Mop needs lifted.
Oh, should we try that? Holly! Holly!
Yeah, when they call me.
Are you coming through, good girl? Come here. Come here.
Sorry, people
Holly.
expected at least 30 for me. Okay. That's fine. It's fucking fine. Again, I mean, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with 30. It's just more like, is that the vibe I give off? Like, that's just fine if I do. I mean, I remember, like, before people knew my face, before people knew anything about me, Tumblr thought that I was a woman for a long time. And they also thought I was a woman who was very, very senior in government. Basically, they thought I was like Nicola Sturgeon's side blog or something like that. But yeah, the beard adds the beard adds about 20 years. I'm not joking. Arch Factor, thank you for gifting a sub to Shooter Boy. That's very kind of you. So the question that was asked was
how did you get in? Yeah, how did you get into doing the political blog?
Okay, so purely Eye for Scotland is quite a simple story, to be honest. But my political journey, I suppose, on the run up to that was like the first political march I attended was the big Make Poverty History ones. Do you remember them? Like way back, I was pretty young when that was, and I remember marching there, and that was like, it was kind of like non particularly biased, you know, like end poverty. I'd say that's quite a good first political goal. haven't achieved it yet, but you know, at least I did the march. And it was like, it was a very, very big thing. I remember there was like concerts and everything for it. It was a big, big deal. I actually think it started in the Meadows in Edinburgh. Was the
Mm.
march. But so I for Scotland began sort of. I remember it was 2013, and it was like October 2013. So I had been campaigning for Scottish independence for like a fair wee bit, um, and one of the things that I did every single week without fail, was I attended the Yes stall that was in the High Street in Falkirk. Um, so it was like I was one of the young people that helped out, and like this was kind of really early days of the independence campaign as well, because one of the things that it got a lot better, but one of the things that the Yes campaign didn't have ironed out immediately at the start was a big kind of young people's support.
Mm.
I think it was the natural position of a lot of young people, and is still the like, and you know, there's lots of young people that do not remember a Scotland before devolution.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot more of that identity kind of baked into them. Whereas, you know, like I can remember bits of it, but I wasn't politically aware enough to the point where Scotland didn't have a parliament before I was actually thinking about politics. But one of the things that I'd kind of grown up with, you know, I'd done fencing competitions. I always wanted to represent Scotland as like in the national team. And the weird thing about fencing was that I ended up representing GB before I represented Scotland. It's just weird
Mm-hmm.
how that works. But I was like, like I got my name on the back of my kit. So like while I was fencing, like you had my surname along the back, and you had GBR, and that was before I got the Scotland stuff. But going down and fencing in England all the time, you ran into quite a lot of your sort of wealthy, posh kind of characters, and I remember being treated like really really shitly by them. So I already had like that was my only interface with England, really, was like going to really really wealthy schools where they had fencing clubs and doing competitions, and getting all of the looks and the glares and the snarky wee comments from all the pricks that attended that. You're gonna make me out to be like a massive, massive Scottish nationalist here, and it's like a hatred of that. But it was a particular thing that, like, I remember when I said I wanted to, like, I was must have been about 5, and I was like, my goal is to represent Scotland in the Olympics. And I remember my coach took issue with that and was like, well, you can't represent Scotland in the Olympics because you can only represent GB. And I was like, how no? Scotland's a country. So like that was a very young, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
getting to understand the political makeup of the UK, and I didn't understand because Scotland's a country, Scotland's my country, you know, that kind of thing. But then as I was going through high school, obviously, and like the independence campaign was like kicking into gear, you actually then got introduced to a lot of the genuine arguments for Scottish independence. So you got to hear about, you know, things like nuclear weapons, things like currency, things like EU, and it was like kind of, um, you know, like there was kind of like a mass awareness campaign into all of these issues. And you know, I used to attend the Yes stall on, like, I think it was every single Saturday in Falkirk, with Yes Falkirk as a group, and we would, you know, hand out leaflets and, you know, answer questions and all this sort of stuff. And then my family went on holiday. We went to Centre Parks,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember like we've been to Centre Parks like pretty much every year. It was like literally the only holiday that my family could like afford, um, and so it was like a thing for us. We did that every year, and that was like the kind of one holiday before. Well, I mean, I think Centre Park prices now are just insane anyway. But I remember like I was like lying by the pool one day, and of course I'd been about in the same pools like growing up all the time. So I was like, I was
Hello
itching
there.
to do something. I was really annoyed that I didn't have that Yes stall to go to because I was on holiday. And it was only the one weekend I was away for. But I was like, I kind of like, I was early on Tumblr. I had my personal account, which has long since vanished into the ether. But it was, it was it was a pretty like it was just a standard Tumblr blog really. It was a teenage boys Tumblr blog, put it that way. And I was very much into my metal bands and all that shit. But then when I started to switch, I was like, I for Scotland. I don't remember the first time I was called I. I don't like. I think it was people just started referring to me as I, and that became a completely different beast. But I don't obviously there's quite a few people in the Discord that know my actual name, but I has very much became like a thing that I'm known by, similar to yourself, I imagine, Joy. It's like that. It almost becomes an identity of its own that's not really separable. But yeah, who followed who first? I was probably following Joy first, I would say. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't think we've ever put it to the test. Mutual sense will be a thing.
Yeah, mutual sense. I don't even know. I think I followed you when Indie Ref was starting to kick off, and it was because I had finally moved over here and I felt so removed from everything. And I was just looking for Scottish blogs in general. Old Glasgow was the other one. And yeah, just kind of I was looking for a sense of community that I lost completely when I moved over here.
Yeah. And I can imagine that was pretty tough. But I mean, like that was the goal of the blog, funnily enough, was I am going to try and get as many 16, 17-year-olds to register to vote and to actually vote in the referendum, because that was the first time that 16 and 17-year-olds could vote, was the Scottish independence referendum in 2014. So that was my target demographic. I was like, there's probably a bunch of us on Tumblr, people who were 15 and would be of age come referendum. I wanted to make sure that they knew enough about it that they could make an informed choice. So I think it started with me just like kind of sharing content, and then it kind of slowly morphed into me doing a lot more commentary on things. And I remember I used to write fucking you think Colour of the Sky is a fucking long post. Let me tell you. Speaking about trying to cover like a mismatch of like fucking currency and nuclear weapons and fucking EU membership and whether Spain was gonna veto it, and fucking Scottish oil and the economy. It's fucking everything. And to be honest, I think quite a lot of people just generally liked it. And then it started to get more international interest. I mean, one of the things that I find really funny about it is that I didn't get over 1,000 followers by the date of the referendum. Like, I was a very, very small blog, but I remember the amount of debating and arguing and all the rest of it. Because I used to get fucking awful anons. Like, I used to, like... Tumblr was weirdly unionist, and I think either they've all blocked me, or we've like slowly scared them all off, or they've basically gotten.
They're all on Twitter.
They're either now all on Twitter, but I do think there's probably quite a few people who hate followed me for a bit, who have now just kind of. They're probably the same folk who now like a lot of the stuff that I post. And that was the exact same thing that I was dealing with at high school as well. It was pretty interesting how, like, we got to I was in China when, and to be honest, this is why I for Scotland continued. I think if I'd went straight into university, it wouldn't have continued in the same way, because I would have. I think there's a benefit of being a blog where obviously I'm very pro-Scottish independence, which limits me to the certain parties that I can support in the Scottish political sphere. And while I do vote SNP, I think what's quite good about my blog is that I can be like, I don't need to like toe the party line, and I can like I can criticize things. I can criticize things that the Greens do, and I can, like, I mean, to be honest, I rarely approve of anything that the Unionist parties do, anyway. But like, it's not like
You're also critical of the SNP when you need to be as well. Like,
yeah,
there's absolutely, it's not just blind nationalism, which is what I think a lot of people assume when they hear Scottish National Party, because
yeah,
Scottish nationalism is slightly different from what a lot of people think of. But then you're also not afraid to actually go, actually, you're being totally out of line. You need to pull it back in because this is not in line with the values that we want for modern Scotland.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I think that's one of the things that's really quite beneficial about it. I mean, to be honest, I'm a much better person for running Eye for Scotland, right? Like 100%. The amount of the amount of knowledge and education that's been kind of passed over to me, from Tumblr in regards to a bunch of social issues that I would just not be aware of. Like, I
mhm.
think I would have still maybe gone down that path, but I don't think I'd be half as knowledgeable about certain things as I am now. I mean, I remember, and you're gonna laugh, and you're also gonna go, "Oh dear God, that could have been a bin fire." But I remember the first time I accidentally and completely, I was just ignorant. I used the word transvestite as opposed to transgender, and I didn't know. Like, this is way back. This is like, I'm not joking. This is probably still 2014, and I think I said transvestite in response to an anon message because I hadn't heard the word transgender, and I think they did say trans in their ask,
Mhm.
and that's the only word that I thought it was. And immediately everyone was like, hang on a wee second. But like, look, in fairness, and I spoke about this in my Thai stream when we did our first charity stream, but like it was that, like, people were patient with me and they explained it and
Mhm.
it ended up being really good. And I'd like to think that I've fixed past wrongs, and I obviously like kind of stick with what I know now. And I like, it's one of those things I always try and speak to people before I make a judgment about a community that, like, I'm an ally of, but I'm not part of to the point where I know all the minutiae about it. So,
Mhm.
and like, obviously, there's lots of people that are in that position. There's people in the community who maybe don't know about minutiae within the community. Like,
Well,
for example, black LGBT people, like, I'm not saying that I'm twice removed from that, but I'm neither LGBT nor am I black. So I'm like, there's never going to be that, there's never going to be the same understanding.
yeah, it's not your place to be an educator. It's your place to signal boost other people's voices in that regard. But it's also, talking about the people within the community who don't know everything as well. There's also, age divide. There's a lovely, lovely person who lives where my parents live, and he still uses the term transvestite because that was the term
Mm,
when he was growing up. Like, and you try to tell him that that's not really the word we use anymore. We use that, and his response is, "Oh, I'm so glad they have those words in this community, but that doesn't feel right to me." So there's that kind of,
yeah.
I don't know. There's so much difference between generations, and there's so much that got lost between generations.
Mm.
And
I think,
it's
like,
you can't know everything, and when you're not
yeah.
exposed to things all day, every day through the community, you're obviously not going to be as genned up as, you know, somebody who deals with it constantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think, like, Tumblr did a lot, and like, I suppose as I for Scotland kind of grew, there was a point. I mean, I've still got a Facebook page for I for Scotland, which I should really just fucking turn off. But the weird thing is I still get notifications from it of people liking it, and it's like, I have not posted on that page in fucking probably about a year now at least, and it was never anything other than me just throwing up a random post now. But when you've got like folks aunties and stuff like that posting like weird shit or commenting weird shit, I was like, nah, I don't want that. I mean, I real like I'm trying to be a wee bit better at posting on Instagram. Um, the why is the plushie on the mic? Is literally a new addition for this stream, Vortec. It's is it Vortec or Vortec? Just let me know if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But yeah, it's cute. I'll probably end up trying to like tie it on somehow if we can kind of get that a thing. But like, yeah, back to that. I mean, like, obviously growing. I hate saying growing the brand. The Eye for Scotland brand. Sky mentioned it earlier, but like, um, it was quite a big moment when Sky invoiced me for an editing thing and had written Eye for Scotland as the name, and it was like, okay, I'm now signing like documentation. Similarly with the vampire stream, the first vampire stream that we did like 2 weeks back, that was a contract effectively with Sony Interactive Entertainment, and it was like it was like I had to sign it with my name. I nearly said my full name on stream there.
Yeah, don't do that.
I had to sign it with my name, my actual name, and then I had is it also known as I for Scotland was that, and it's like holy shit, I'm actually also known as I for Scotland or
Yeah.
I. So that was it was pretty interesting. I suppose how I got into streaming, is a is an interesting story. It was like literally my second year at uni, coming to the end of my second year at uni, and what ended up happening was I moved in with my ex, who had been complaining all year about how slow our internet was, and I'd visited a couple of times, and I was like, okay, every time I'd been, it kind of worked. Sorry, Jessica. But in fairness, what happened was I ended up meeting Jessica, so it's not all bad. But what happened was I moved in, and of course the first fucking thing that I clocked when I go into a new place is how good the internet is. So I wanted to watch telly. And this is when I wanted to start streaming, and I wanted to start streaming off my Xbox. So I downloaded the Twitch app for Xbox, and didn't have a face cam. Was using my Xbox mic, my tiny fragile headset Xbox mic, and I was streaming like Outlast to people. But one of the things I noticed right away was the internet was terrible, and I went to investigate why. And what happened was that she'd moved in with a group of her friends, and they'd each divvied up a utility. So one was in charge of the electric bill, and one was in charge of gas, and one was in charge of internet. And the person who was in charge of internet, he just decided to use the same internet that his mum and dad use at their house in Glasgow. Bear in mind this was in Edinburgh in Marchmont. Yep. So decided to say, oh, we'll just get the Sky package. Okay. So they sign a contract for Sky package. They're paying like 70 quid a month. Sky was able to offer them 1 megabyte per second download speed. And if they had done an iota of research, bear in mind they'd signed a year contract. It wasn't a rolling thing. They signed a year contract, so they couldn't get out of it. But what they'd done was they'd actually unplugged the old box, and I was like, oh, that's odd. Why is there a router here? So that was a Virgin router that offered fibre optic broadband at 250 megabytes per second download speed. And the entire fucking year, my ex at the time and her friends had been, like, they'd been studying in the library because the internet in their flat was terrible. And they were all year complaining about it all year. And I didn't get angry, but I burst out laughing, right? I found it so fucking funny. It was like, you had one job to look after this one utility, and you absolutely fucked it. And I was laughing, and they all fell out. Every single one of them fell out of me, just because I was laughing at it so bad. They were like, yeah, that's, really, really mean. And I was like, you were on 1 megabyte per second. It's like, internet is so important. Kind of back to what we were saying, is like, you need money to actually do stuff. And it's like, Jesus, it's like 250 megabytes per second they were missing out. So what I ended up doing was, luckily, I knew someone who was like a friend of a friend who was in the flat next to theirs, and asked very, very politely, what internet do you have? Oh, we're on Virgin, but it's only me in the flat. And I was like, is there any chance you can give me the password for your router so I can connect my Xbox up to stream? and that allowed me to stream Outlast to people. It was like the horror game, and people got a kind of good reaction out of it. I think it was really, really experimental to start with, but
Mm-hmm.
hey, it's turned into doing a podcast with an international best-selling author, so it's not too bad. Um, but yeah, it's like that jump to Twitch was when I suppose the brand became a bit bigger, because through Twitch then there was like the Eye for Scotland Discord was set up, which you should all join, and yeah, it was good. But like I think obviously the Eye for Scotland blog's kind of like changed over time. Like now I don't feel the need to like really spell out so much about Scottish independence to people, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that there's not still people who are undecided, but because we're not in like active campaign mode, and the like post independence is a very like post independence referendum is a very different world. Um,
Yes.
and people's reactions to like media campaigns and stuff like that online, people are way more skeptical about it now. Um, so now it's more about like community building and just making sure that everyone's like all right. That's pretty much it. And of course, like making people aware of some stuff. I mean, like the Queen giving an award to the head of the Orange Order, for example. That's something that quite a lot of my international followers won't have a clue
That
about.
was that was I actually when I read that I was very disgusted
Oh
by
yeah,
that.
but I mean, just fucking typical, isn't it though?
Have a good
But
night, Carly Wench. Enjoy your dinner.
no worries, Carly. Have a good one. But like, yeah, I suppose it's more along that lines now. It's like I quite like keeping it light, keeping it like informative, and of course shit posting on occasion. Except like I've said before, but like the moment your Tumblr post gets over 5,000 notes, just
In
burn it.
fire.
Yeah, throw it away, throw it in the bin. Um, like there's a couple of old ones that I find that occasionally get reblogged. I'm like, why are people still reblogging this? I hate every single one of you. Um, but like I think that's the way that Tumblr works really well as a thing. But yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Joy. That's the brief history of Life for Scotland.
A
How?
good one.
Yeah, and to be fair, coming up with the name was a pain in the arse. I sat by the pool, basically being like, I can't have it Yes for Scotland because the campaign's called Yes Scotland. That's silly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I Scotland, nah, I for. I mean, it is for Scotland at the end of the day. And yeah, that's what I went with. Originally I had it as an idea that it was a placeholder for if something better came up, I could always just change the name. But no, it's stuck. I'm never changing my name ever now.
I do that with all my titles a lot, and then everyone tells me it's a good fit. So I think sometimes it just works that
Yeah,
way. I think it works.
and as Sky's pointed out, I've also made some YouTube videos, or at least, yeah,
And
they've
they're very good YouTube videos.
they've made their mark. I had a lot of help from everyone, particularly Sky on the editing side. Is Orange is the Yeah, so it's the Orange Order. It's it's not the same in regards to. Nah, I can't. There's not.
It's not about racism. It's about religion.
A lot of them are racist. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, all of them are racist as well. But
But
that's not the main focus of what the Orange Order is. The Orange Order is very anti-Catholic,
yeah,
which goes
often
causes
translates
a
to
lot.
anti-Irish.
Yeah, very anti-Irish as well. And they were the source of a lot of conflict. I don't not so much maybe when you were younger, but definitely when I was younger, they were kind of like they were seen as a more militant holdover from the Troubles.
Yeah,
And you had entire Irish Catholic communities in Scotland. They would not go outside during the Orange Order walks because you'd get beat up basically.
yeah. I mean, they
Um,
still cause fucking riot. Like, I mean, so the Orange Marches happen this month, unfortunately. As Bob Onion says, I mean, like they do essentially boil down to like a hate group. I mean,
yeah,
literally a couple of years ago, I think there was a bunch of them that were um like they spat on a priest outside his church and stuff.
hmm
It's just like really fucking nasty shit like that. It is like definitely this like hangover. I mean, to be honest, though, like as awful as it is dying off, right? Like there's
Yes,
the
yeah.
numbers are dropping massively because like I'm sorry, if you give the wee kid a choice between fucking playing on an iPad or going for flute lessons with his fucking grandpa, he's gonna be playing with the iPad. Like it's
Hmm.
you know it's very
It used
yeah.
to be a huge thing when I was wee.
Mm-hmm.
Like a huge, like you, it used to shut down entire routes in Glasgow, and you could not get from A to B when there was a march on.
Yeah.
Now it feels like that it's less of a huge procession, and it's just a bunch of old bigots walking down the street
It's,
with a pipe whistle and a drum. Whereas
yeah.
before it used to be if you were stuck on a bus behind them, that was you. You were phoning your work to say, "I'm stuck behind an orange walk," and they go, "All right, see you in 2 to 3 hours." Then yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But it's I hope it is hopefully going to die out sooner rather than later. But the fact that the Queen honoured it was just very telling. It was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're still okay with that particular brand of bigotry, okay, you know.
Yeah. It's something that'll, pass with time. I reckon by the time, if I have grandchildren at some point, I reckon it'll be pretty minimal. I imagine there'll still be some folk, but like, by the time I'm an old man, it'll be kind of gone. Um, Addresses parcel to you, Mr. Ivor Scotland, near the Kelpies, Scotland, other side of the Atlantic on the North Sea. You're not far off. Yet near the Kelpies will do it, because that'll just be like Falkirk.
The postman will go, I went Falkirk, yeah,
But yeah, I think it is something that'll just kind of peter out over time. Um, we'll wait and
They're just
see.
such an embarrassment. They're really just such
Aye,
a horrible holdover from segregation and bigotry. And the
yeah.
fact that they think they're still remotely relevant is
Beggars
it's
belief.
just, it does, it really does. It's go and chase yourself, get out of here. You don't belong in a civilized age. You really don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Similar to the monarchy, to be honest, and you'll find
Pretty
that they are
much.
the strongest supporters of the monarchy.
Well, they
Um,
tend to be unionists.
yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Well, they've kind of got to be, I think. I don't know many Orange folk who would back independence. Um, but I mean, again, like this is the thing is that with the prospect of obviously Sinn Féin in Ireland getting the highest amount of the vote, you know kind of young Ireland's changing, like Northern Ireland, the young people there are like beginning to kind of change their attitudes. And there's also probably a bunch of Northern Irish unionists who are just beginning to kind of recognise that London doesn't give a shit about them, and
Yep.
never has. Um, I think that's it's an interesting one. Um, See you later, Sky. Have a good one. Um, I do have to ask the question, Joy. Are we are we notting this podcast? Are we notting hilling this podcast?
That's up to you. It's you that
And
has to read it.
it's you that has to sit there and deal with the mental anguish.
Listen, I make my money doing this sort of thing. This is fine. I will just tune out. It'll be fine. No, it depends on if people want to stick around for it
Yeah,
as well.
do
I can very
people?
easily,
Yeah, do people want to hear it? I suppose.
because it's very easy. I can just start posting the chapters on AO3 as well. If people don't want to stick around and listen to it, but because it might be too explicit for some people. Just
Yeah.
as a warning.
People
I
are
like the immediate. I got nowhere to be. Horny jail, and yes, okay.
okay.
If you've read any of my smut, it's on par with that, but it gets into it more quickly than I normally would because I just went straight to horny jail with it. So,
As you fucking should. I can't do the whole thing with a Sean Connery voice. I'm like, look, I'd need to go to like proper like coaching for that.
think of his throat. You don't want to make him so that he's having to do ASMR for the rest of the week.
Thanks very much, Vortic. No, I can't. I'll maybe give you like a paragraph or two in Sean Connery. I can't do the full fucking thing because like there's too many S's involved in every paragraph. I just that would just be it. Just okay. I'll do it for a wee sentence. I'll try and find the horniest sentence in the thing, which
Good luck.
is yeah. Well, narrowing it down, we'll have a short list of about 40 paragraphs. But if it's something that people are interested in, I feel like this young Highland cow doesn't deserve that much.
You're gonna have to cover the cow's ears.
Right, I'll just load it up. We do have it. I won't pop it on screen because I know that Joy is going to be firing it up on AO3 at some point.
Yes.
So you could do that.
We
stream.
may want to give content warnings for anyone that wants to nope out and or temporarily mute us. It does involve heat cycles, scent marks, jerking off, and the usual. If you know what ABO fanfic is, think of that. Think of the Megaverse, and that is I've gone full Megaverse trope for this.
I'll be thinking of the children who should never hear this.
Well, hopefully there's no children watching your stream. we are marked as adult on this channel.
We are. So, okay, I'm gonna set this is like literally the last 30 seconds before I start. But yeah, just a heads up to everyone. We're gonna have people who join the stream and go, holy shit. Like newcomers to the stream who go, what in the fuck have I just landed into? So we should probably have like a disclaimer. Like, I wish you could like pin messages in chat just being like, yeah, this is what you've stepped into. I do apologize. Right, okay. Here we go. I'm gonna have to move my wee guy, I'm afraid. He'll sit next to me for now. All right, prepare and pray for my voice. We have a full chapter to get through.
I think it's about 20 minutes of reading, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'll try not to speed up. I'll try and give each sentence the right cadence. But if people want to curl up into a ball and cry, that's also allowed. So.
Also okay to enjoy it too. Just throwing that out there. If this is your thing, fantastic. I'll look forward to seeing you on AO3.
Yeah. You can, if you switch over to another tab, just don't look directly into my eyes while you masturbate to this. Unless you want to, but that is another thing. Right, okay. Joy, you're going to have to give me a countdown, I suppose, or some moral strength.
I don't think I have any moral strength left after writing that. After 3?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Notting Hill, with a K. Chapter 1. It was just another hopeless Wednesday morning when William Thacker awoke to the sound of the Portobello Market setting up shop outside his bedroom window. He lay under the covers, refusing to move until necessity forced him. He stared up at the cracks in the white plaster ceiling, tracking their progress towards the windows as the watery English sunlight crept in through a gap in the curtains. The realtor who'd sold him the place said it brought antiquated character to the otherwise modernised Victorian terrace. Now all Will could see was how much it would cost him to fix when the whole thing inevitably collapsed, just like the rest of his life. Will conceded that he was likely catastrophising his current financial situation, though considering the bookshop made a negative profit last month, and the month before that, and the one before that, Will also couldn't help but worry he wasn't catastrophising enough. To panic or not to panic? That was the question. He'd gotten by fine, fumbling through life for years, bouncing around and following wherever life took him, a professional underachiever, Max called it. It served him well until Charlotte left him for a beta who looked just like Harrison Ford, which was worse than if she'd left him for actual Harrison Ford, because at least then she'd have the excuse of falling for the raw animal magnetism all alphas exuded instead of another beta. Or perhaps Will was letting his Omega show. Probably the latter. Christ, he needed to get laid. He'd dated for a bit after things ended with Charlotte, but it never resulted in anything meaningful. The sex was nice, quite pleasant when all was said and done. He'd even been lucky enough to meet one or two female betas who leaned more alpha, if not in biology, then at least in mentality. That had been fun. Scratched an itch, so to speak. It was just a shame that nothing ever came of them. The problem was, well, him. It wasn't his Omega status, no. It was the bumbling, tongue-tied nonsense that came tumbling out of his mouth the minute he tried to hold a conversation about anything other than books. And even then, he rambled inanely. What Will needed, what he really needed, was someone to take charge and give him something else to do with his mouth. Or to tell him to shut up. Either would do. Please subscribe to my stream. Outside, a fruit stall hawker proclaimed his wares, signalling the end of the morning quiet. Will sighed and rolled stiffly out of bed. The bookshop didn't open until 10. He couldn't afford to pay Martin to come in any earlier than that, but he supposed he should make a start on his day. At least that way, Will might get to enjoy a cup of tea in quiet before his roommate Spike woke up and filled Will's life with noise and confusion. Mindful of said sleeping roommate, Will crept out onto the landing and into the cramped bathroom at the end of the hall. Allowing the shower to warm up, he turned to regard himself in the mirror over the sink. He'd slept like shit, and it showed in his reflection. The brown waves of his hair stuck out at all angles in a spectacular case of bedhead, and there was a puffy redness around his eyes that looked decisively snivelly, almost like he'd been crying. Will frowned, peering closer into the gradually fogging mirror. Was that razor burn on his neck? He craned his neck, trying to see where the blotchy red mess ended. It was a hell of a lousy shave job if it was. It went almost the whole way down his neck, right the way down to his scent glands. Shit, fuck. Will jerked back from tracing the red mark, a visceral shudder running through him as the overly sensitive skin lit up beneath his fingers, sending sparks of arousal shuddering down his spine to his suddenly wet, clenching hole. It wasn't razor burn. He was going into fucking heat. Shit, fucking buggering bollocks. Will fumbled to open his toiletry bag, searching in vain for the suppressants. When was the last time he'd taken them? And just how the fuck had he forgotten such an important thing? He'd been zealous about taking them since Charlotte left, desperate not to succumb to a heat without her steadying beta presence. How? How could he have let this happen? It was fucking Spike, wasn't it? The alpha had moved in, and Will had gotten sloppy about taking his suppressants. It didn't matter that the other man was A, a man, or B, completely fucking gormless and infuriating. Will's biological clock had latched onto the alpha's pheromones, and now here he was, a 34-year-old man, going into an unplanned heat like a fucking teenager. And where the fuck was his prescription? Sorry. The pill bottle clattered to the tiled floor, giving a distressingly singular rattle. Will scooped it up and popped the safety cap off. A single pill tumbled into his open palm. Will stared at it in horror. Not only had he forgotten to take them, but he'd also forgotten to finish his last dose and refill his prescription too. Will stared, his gaze coming unfocused on the pill as he tried to plan what to do. If he ran to Boots before opening time, the pharmacist might be able to call his GP and get it filled for him today. It wouldn't be enough to stop the heat cycle, but it'd be enough to make it bearable. He hoped, yes, that's what he'd do. He'd take this dose now, run to Boots before breakfast, place an emergency prescription, and somehow try to get through the rest of the day without wanking himself to death. This was fine. It'd all be fine. Shoving the pill in his mouth, Will swallowed it dry, ripped his boxers off, and flung himself into the shower. Now that he was aware of it, the signs of heat were unmistakable. His cock hung heavily between his thighs, a steady throbbing ache building at the base of his spine that was too intense to be regular morning wood. His skin felt tender too, warm and painfully sensitive to the touch, like he had a fever. Even the warm spray of the shower hitting his back felt like too much. Too good. Like he might just melt into a puddle of whimpering slick at any moment. Which was another thing he was now keenly aware of. Warm slick gathered between his thighs, dripping from his hole. It usually took several days into a heat for him to get wet like this, which meant he'd likely been giving off pheromones for days, if not weeks, broadcasting his omega status to every alpha and beta within a 5-mile radius. Like a wonton slut. Will whimpered as his hand closed around the throbbing length of his cock, stroking leisurely. He knew this was a bad idea, that it was, in fact, the opposite of what Will needed to do right now. What he needed was to wash the night's sweat and pheromones from his skin as quickly as possible and head out the door. He needed to get his prescription filled. But another more primal urge desperately needed to take the edge off the growing hunger clawing up his spine. And now that he'd started, Will was powerless to stop. He groaned helplessly, tipping his head back under the shower spray as his fist pumped rhythmically around his cock. It was so good. It felt so fucking good. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough when he was in heat. Reaching behind himself, Will trailed a tentative finger up the slick crack of his arse, his knees buckling when he pressed against the tight warmth of his hole. God, he was wet. He was so fucking wet. It'd take no effort to push 2 fingers inside and fuck himself senseless. Except once he'd started, there was no way of telling if he'd have the willpower to stop. The thought of going through a full heat cycle alone was miserable, and Will knew he'd likely chafe himself raw trying. But perhaps he could trick his body into submission, just for a bit. He pressed against his hole again, applying pressure, but not enough to push inside. His entire pelvic region throbbed, and he let out a pitiful whine, the other hand still wrapped around his cock, speeding up, winding the pressure in his spine to breaking point. He came silently, like his head tipped back, his breath caught in his throat as cum spilled over the vice-like grip of his fist. It didn't quell the ache at the base of his spine, but it was enough for now. He needed to scrub extra hard to get the smell of sex off him before he got out the shower, but as the heat in his veins died down to a simmer, Will thought it'd been worth it. 10, maybe 15 minutes later, he threw himself out the blue front door of his terrace house, his hair still wet and blue linen shirt sticking to his back where he'd missed the spot with the towel. He pushed through the busy market street, dodging politely through a sea of vendors, a riotous rainbow of... Sorry, fucking comment, Joy. A riotous rainbow of scents and colours as fresh fruit, baked goods and flowers were shoved hopefully in his path. Usually he'd enjoy this part of his daily walk. He'd love to amble around the tiny village of London, taking in the sights and sound of people going about their daily lives. From the antique shop on the corner that took over the street on Sundays to the tattoo parlour sandwiched between a halal butcher on one side and a Jamaican grocer on the other, where lively music blared no matter the time of day. He even liked to watch the people coming out of the hairdresser across the road, where people always seemed to emerge with funky hairdos, looking like the Cookie Monster, whether they wanted to or not. But right now, he'd cheerfully punt all of them out of the way if it meant getting to Boots before opening time. As luck would have it, he rounded the corner just as the shutters to the high street store were being rolled back. He stood front and centre to the entrance, bobbing agitatedly on his heels, trying to convince himself the stares he was getting were because he was being a massive weirdo and not because everyone could smell the heat on him. The minute the blue sign on the shop door changed from closed to open, he pushed his way inside, muttering apologies to the staff as he all but ran to the back of the shop where the pharmacy was situated. Gertie, he called with faux joviality, smiling broadly as the elderly woman with blue-tinted hair looked up behind the pristine white counter. Looking lovely as ever, when are you going to leave that old codger of yours and run away with me? William, she greeted him, her smile thin and knowing. I had a feeling I might be seeing you soon. Really? Why is that? Will asked. The smile on his face was bordering on a rictus grimace. You could feel sweat starting to bead on his forehead, trickling down the back of his neck. He felt hot too, like you could fry an egg on his stupid, pill-forgetting, shovel-shaped face. He hoped it wasn't visible. It likely was. Finally realised you forgot to fill something? She asked, tapping single-fingered at the brick on the keyboard in front of her. Ha-ha! Will laughed like he was dying. How did you guess? I don't suppose there's any chance I could press upon you the need for an emergency prescription. He gripped the edge of the counter, all but prostrating himself at her mercy. Even the shitty synthetic pheromones and the chokingly sweet perfume samples surrounding him were getting to him. At least he told himself that, because the alternative was that it was Gertrude who was turning him on, and Will thought the only cure for that might be to throw himself in the Thames. Please, he added softly, not above actually begging. Gertrude's expression softened. I can't make any promises, but I'll try to have it ready for you by lunchtime. Oh God, thank you. He thought he might just kiss her after all. Thank you, and I'm sorry for all the extra work. I won't forget again. Gertrude gave him a motherly pat on the head. Don't make promises you can't keep, dear. She gave him a concerned once-over. We've patches in the back if you need them. Will hesitated. The hormonal patches were the equivalent of the morning after pill, capable of stalling heats even after they'd started. Supposedly they worked on alphas too, though Will couldn't ever imagine an alpha forgetting to take their rut suppressants. Many people used them just fine without issue, but for Will it was the emotional equivalent of being kneecapped with a crowbar. Wretched as solo heats were, being ripped out of one by a massive shitwhack of hormones was even worse. No, thank you. I'll be fine. He smiled wanly, knowing it was true. Surely he'd be miserably horny and overly emotional for a week, but he wouldn't be completely incapacitated. And who knew? Maybe if he was lucky, he'd bump into the alpha of his dreams between now and lunch and spend the week holed up, debauched little lust nest. Yeah, right, but a humble bookseller could dream. Well, you know where they are if you need them, Gertrude said, her attention already back on the screen. Sensing he'd been dismissed, Will turned and headed back out into the blessedly cool English morning and back to the house. If his luck held, he'd still have time for that quiet cup of tea before Spike surfaced from his pit like the creature from the Black Lagoon on what was left of Will's rapidly dwindling sanity. And that is the end of chapter 1. Thanks,
You didn't
Joy.
look like you were dying for most of it.
Thanks, Joy.
Sure. Glad to contribute to your suffering.
That was good.
Thank you.
I
Not my
hope...
usual cup of tea when I'm writing, but I did appreciate the fact that we were at 69 followers for most of that. 69 views, I should say.
I feel like that was deliberate. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. It was exceptionally well written and at lightning speed, might I add. So, again, can only comment on how incredible Joy's writing is. And you should all go and buy her book that she got way more time to actually edit and turn into... Oh, I don't know what I just did with your camera. There we go. But yeah, that's you should all follow that PHIP link and buy some books.
Thank you. My books are slightly different from that. That was extremely straight into horny jail town. But yes, it was...
Like, just to give you an idea of that, like, Joy wrote all of that over the course of, like, 1-2 hour stream. And, in fact, no, probably in, like, an hour and a half. And I know that has been edited, but, like, that was the pace. So, like, the writing is exceptional, as always.
When I get going, I get pretty fast. But yeah, at the same time, it was fun because I got to research things, because it's... Omegaverse is not really my cup of tea, despite the fact that I write about werewolves. But it was also super fun because I ended up downloading the Notting Hill script, the screenplay, and the dialogue is all. It's not just Hugh Grant being Hugh Grant with his awkwardness. It's actually written that way. From the dialogue, it actually has the stutters and the fumbles, and I'm like, oh, he basically took Hugh Grant's personality from the 90s and they made a film to capitalize on it. So.
Sorry, Joy, I don't know what's going on with your camera right now. I'm going to fix it because it's annoying me. Let's sort out the joy cam.
The joy cam.
There we go. Yes, that's better. Yeah, so no, that was cool, folks. So again, like, I can't stress enough that, like, you know, as incredible as the writing for that was, you should actually all go and read Hunger Pangs anyway. Like, or you can now listen to Hunger Pangs. Can't you?
The audiobook.
Yeah.
And apparently the other links have gone live as well now, which is fun because other people are seeing them. I'm not seeing them, so I have no idea where the book is currently live for a lot of things. Watched 5 minutes of Notting Hill and cringed so hard. Yeah, Notting Hill is very, very 90s.
Yeah.
Very, very 90s, early 2000s. It's not something you could probably do now with a lot of the tropes. But yeah, it was what it was in the 90s. Or I think, was it 1998? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that kind of peak, like, getting into Notting Hill's okay. Notting Hill is way more fun. yeah, you could say that.
It was specifically, the male character was specifically written for Hugh Grant. And it shows.
it really does. No, that's cool. So I'm just checking your time, Joy, because I imagine there's a dinner that's coming up for you pretty soon.
Yes, we're gonna have to scoot soon, otherwise Holly Mop's gonna start crying, and nobody wants that. So you
Yeah.
can do a name change and publish it. I could. Why would I? I don't want to charge money for this.
Oh no, you should. Like, I mean, sorry, just no. I'm gonna put a co-host banner over that. People should pay Joy for this sort of stuff.
No.
Yeah, no, definitely, 100%. Like, you publish that as a full thing with a name change. Like, why not? So yeah, Joy's too kind. You've got a talent. It deserves to be monetized.
I
So
know I'm using it.
so the yeah so the full price should go, even if it's just like a wee novella thing. Like, why not put it
Yeah,
as like
it's not.
a Patreon bonus or something? I don't know.
I could, but you can't put fan fiction on Patreon, so that's, or you can if you're smart about it, I suppose. But
Doesn't
yeah,
need to be fan fiction with a name change. It could just be about a couple of guys hanging out, getting
true,
horny, going
true.
going through the whole.
You want to say another? Yes, please do not give me any more works in progress. I tried to open my my WIP folder the other day, and my computer made a sound like R2D2 going through a jet engine. It was not good. It made a lot of distress noises.
while
um,
while I was writing a YouTube script this morning, I had a brainwave and started another one like halfway through, and like decided to write like sections of that, taken away from the actual video that I was hoping to kind of like finish and cut my teeth on fairly quickly. So it's mind goes everywhere, doesn't it?
and you and I need to finish our discussion about possible ADHD creativity mapping. I think.
Yeah. There was yeah, I've yeah. There's
Bye, Pentagon. Have a good night.
I'm definitely on that. Well, let's say I would love to be on a waiting list that would take 3 years. It might mean that I just need to go like private to have a wee look at that
Yeah.
side of things. But no, I definitely like. There's a couple of things that obviously we need to chat about, and one of which is. Again, for any artists in the audience, we've already had a bunch of
Oh,
emails
that's
through.
right. Yeah.
So thanks very much for sending them through. That's still very much open. We're not going to make a decision until we've actually allowed the offer to kind of breathe for a wee bit. So like if you're still interested, you know, we've had lots of good submissions so far. So we're going to be assessing them. We've not set a date for it yet, but we will be assessing them soon. So if you've got a portfolio and anything else, please do consider sending some of your artwork to our email. We've got an email.
We do have an email now.
Which is the AyeSphere. I feel like I should have a hotkey for this. The AyeSphere@gmail.com. I think that's it.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's yeah, it is.
Well, we made over 100 subscribers on YouTube as
We
well.
did,
Which
and
was fantastic.
we need to sort that out with the custom link. It sometimes takes a wee bit longer for the custom links to go live, but it means that we've now got that. And the good news is that well, this will probably go up. We'll need to maybe have a wee think about that VOD side of things in regards to bleeping. And
Yes.
also thanks to everyone who hasn't reported this stream.
Or not for not leaving. Thank you
Or
very
for
much
not leaving, yeah.
Not just leave. Like, I was fully expecting to just watch the numbers go.
But yeah, that's it's all good. It's quite good. So now I've got like a whole bunch of links to post at the end. Hold on, let's just see if we can get him. Nope, come on. I'll find a way to like attach my wee guy to this. I think this is a better place for him rather than like up here somewhere. You know. If I can maybe.
It's very cute.
Yeah, if I can have it a wee bit more subtle. I don't know.
Thanks for coming and not calling the cops. Pretty much.
Pretty much. So what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna try and do it in a way that doesn't make Joy's camera freeze. For some reason, whenever I open Google Chrome, it goes nuts. But we're gonna, sorry, I'm just gonna pull out the. We're on 194 subscribers, so we could get to 200 potentially if people are going to follow us from this stream. So that would be
That'd be fantastic.
really cool.
Yeah.
And then it'll be 250 followers will be our next goal. And then we're going to slowly take over the world. But that channel there is the AyeSphere. Eventually it will have channels / the AyeSphere. But yeah, that's where we're at the moment. I suppose I can round up this bit with if you'd like to join the Discord, you absolutely should. There's the Discord there. We've not got an AyeSphere Discord. I feel like there's a lot of ancillary stuff about the podcast that we'll maybe deal with at a later date. But for now, there's my Discord. If you want to jump in, Joy's of course in that, and Joy has their own Discord for Patreon subscribers. So if you want access to that, you know where to go for Joy's Patreon. Then you can check out my other YouTube channel, my For Scotland channel. That's the stuff that I'm writing scripts for and trying to actually nail down one specific creative project. And if you want, you can support me on Ko-Fi. That obviously helps me do the stream. I'm currently looking for full-time work, and I await for a job. Waiting to hear back on a kind of second round of interview for a job next week. So fingers crossed. The Jubilee had delayed me hearing back earlier, which is fucking annoying. And then of course there's Tumblr. So you should all follow me on Tumblr. You should all follow Joy on Tumblr as well. The cesspit of the internet, but we love it really.
Health-like, affectionate, and derogatory.
Yeah. But yeah, that's from me. Joy, would you like to round up?
Just thank you for everyone who's been watching and leaving comments and giving us things to bounce off. You're always such a... I always hate saying such a joy because it always sounds so corny, but you really are such a joy to talk to. I've got such a lovely community here, and I'm so glad that I've been able to bring some of my people into it as well. Follow me on Tumblr if you're not. That's where I'm most active. If you haven't read Hunger Pangs already, then you can follow the link that I just put into the Discord there. That's my Payhip, where I earn most of my royalties from things. There is, of course, Audible and Amazon as well, if that's something you're able to get with credit if you want. But yeah, thank you so much, and thank you again for last week when I was out sick and you were shilling the audiobook for me. I got a lot of support from that, so thank you very much. And thank you for the migraine mushes going away too. Me too. Although I will say these shades are a look on stream. I might just keep them.
I feel like I'm gonna have to get a forehead tattoo or something just to spice me up a little bit. I've got the beard and that's about it. But I also need to maybe change my camera height. I could wear more provocative t-shirts.
You could get a Goblin King t-shirt to match the Goblin
We
King.
should. We'll have to. Well, yeah, we'll coordinate our t-shirts a bit more. But no, thanks very much for that, folks. I will now bid you a good evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are, and we'll see you next week for more AyeSphere.
Bye bye.
See you in a bit, folks. Bye bye.